Can everyone hear me? I'm here, Josh Turner, Paranormal Roundtable, PRT. Got a lot to talk about tonight. We had a ice storm that hit Texas and really smashed into Austin. We were driving yesterday, me and Anthony and Tony, and we almost ran into a giant tree that was in the middle of the road. And I'm not joking. It's been bad over here, really bad. It just kept sleeting and raining, and it was below freezing, so everything was frozen, but it was just ice. It was very light snow, not really snow, just ice. And the ice got so heavy on the trees that all the trees collapsed. And everywhere you could hear, in my neighborhood in particular, it was like just crack, pow, pop, bang, all this stuff. And it was just like, it kept happening. Sounded like gunshots going off. It was crazy. And when the ice was breaking apart and on my roof, I thought it was going to cave in at one point. And I see in the studio now it's, maybe a problem again because the ice must have done something. But we had a really bad ice storm. It was bad. I mean, I'm not joking. It really made a mess of things here in Austin, and there were 10 deaths so far just on the roads. That is just from the overpasses. I don't know what the death tolls and was all done because there's people, but the police were saying that they were having to walk people down off of the overpasses because they were determined to drive on it, and there were like 2 inches of ice on everything. And this seems to happen like every year, and but it just keeps, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, it used to happen like every other year, we'd have a freeze, whatever. There was ice, This is like the third time already this year. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be another one. I mean, it's just February. It happens every February. I don't know. But anyway, it just pray for us down in Texas. You would think that as often as it gets cold down here, that they would actually know how to drive. It's really frustrating for me because people say, well, people in Texas don't know how to drive in the cold weather, but it gets down into the teens and 20s like every year here. Every year. Like every year, as long as I've been alive. When I was in Northwest Texas, it snowed every year. It snows up there. Like every year, it snowed for like 3 or 4 years straight. I mean, and then I came down here and it didn't snow, and I was a little disappointed. But then when it did snow, I saw what a mess it made of everything because it seemed like the North Texaners and the Northwest Texaners knew how to handle the snow better than the Central Texaners. But when you look at the Texans here in Central Texas, you would think that they'd get prepared. At some point you have to go, hey, this happens every year. It's not always as severe, but it gets cold here. And I had some people from Southern California, and they were like, we had no idea how cold it got in Texas. I said, yeah, it gets in the teens every year. At least 2 or 3 times. It goes down, in the 20s and the teens. It's like an ongoing thing. It happens every year. It's hot as hell in the summertime, in the hundreds, and then it gets down in the teens and 20s, and you're thinking, well, I'm from up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It gets down below zero. Yeah, but this is Texas. That's thousands of miles away. And people are just shocked at how cold it gets here. And I tell people, I'm like, dude, and this, speaking of Dallas, this is Dallas Stars, my hockey team, but you look at, I mean, Dallas just was completely iced over. It looked like Hoth. It happens every year up there. Worse than it does here. But I mean, it's crazy. And then they're still not prepared. They're like, people's power is out. People are suffering. And they're just like, I can't believe this is happening. I moved from, wherever, Minnesota, Illinois, whatever. And it's cold as hell down here too. I don't know what to tell you. It's wonderful in the spring and the fall. But in the summer and the winter, it's really cold. But anyway, that's what's going on. We're having issues with the ice and snow. Really just ice is what it is. The snow didn't really do anything. It was just the ice. But here's the thing, guys. I wanted to say something before we get into a story, and then I'm going to bring my guest on. My guest has to come on. He has a lot to say. I wanted to apologize to our guest from last week, Sibylla Irwin. And Actually, Sibylla's in the chat. Sibylla, hi, Sibylla. I want to publicly apologize for that. Sibylla has a lot of interesting things to talk about and say, and I was on a tangent. I went on a tangent, and somebody said I broke into a monologue, whatever. Luckily, it wasn't a villain monologue. But the thing is, I need to apologize to her and get her back on, because I did a disservice by, and yes, a lot of people enjoyed my information, what I said, and gave me that feedback, but other people were like, hey, you know, we listen to you all the time, and we wanted to hear what she had to say, and you took up the spotlight and didn't let her talk enough. And that's that. I do that. That's my flaw. That is something that I've done in the past. Is talk too much. Especially, it seems to happen when I'm really excited about a guest too. It's like I'll bring them on, but I want to talk to them too, and so then I start talking, and it's like it's something I got to work on. I'm not a newbie at this. I started doing my own podcast 2019, but I've been doing this since 2015, like with the other show. But here's the thing. I didn't do that on purpose. It's just something that happens. And then it's like I have some sort of, switch that needs to be turned off. So I'll shut up. But I apologize to everybody because Sibylla is a very kind and sweet person who has a lot of interesting things to say, because I talked to her for like an hour and a half after the conference in Jefferson, which was the highlight of my trip, by the way. It was the after party, because the conference sucked. And it had nothing to do with the guests. The guests were all my friends. It was great. Adam Davies was there, Sibylla. I had no problem with any of the people that were speaking. Of course, Ken and Lyle and Nick. But, or Nick wasn't there, but, some cool people were there. Michigan Rob was there. Tex, Jason, Ryan Edwards. The way that it was put together, and it wasn't fun. Me and Barton didn't really have a good time. There was no internet service to use, so I'll never do it again. I can tell you that. But the highlight was really getting to sit there and talk to Sibylla, and then after not, having her come on and not letting her speak enough, that's on me, and I'm going to work on those kind of things. People. A lot of people liked the show last week. Said there's a lot of good information. That's great, but I still stand by what I say. I was wrong. And speaking of standing by what you say and being wrong, bunch of people are commenting on the national or North American Dogman project split. Now, for those of you who are not aware of what's going on, I got to say this before we get into the show, because a lot of you are Dogman fans, and if you're a Dogman aficionado, you're into the Dogman thing, like I am, and that's what set me on this road, that and living in a freaking haunted house. Let me tell you something. The North American Dogman Project has been a staple of information, of real information, for years. And I've had close ties and dealings with them. I'd say my friendship with Jody goes back to like 2016 or 17. My dealings with Nick Valente were a little more recent. I think it was like right before I started my show, maybe 18, something like that. They're both good guys for the most part, but they're human, okay? They have flaws. And all this crap that's being talked about Nick and DA, it needs to stop, because you don't know the story. You don't know the situation. I do. I know the whole thing, okay? I just earlier tonight was on the phone with Mr. Nick and Valenti and Mr. Jody Cook, and I am trying right now to broker a peace between them. But death threats, dude, really? Because that's what happened to me. Now I'm not gonna sit here and say Jody made a video. He poured his heart out. He was upset. It tugged at people's heartstrings, and he feels very passionate about his organization. I have my own reservations and opinions about this whole situation, but I will say this: under no circumstances do I want any one of my members that listens to the show, and I can't tell you what to do. I'm not your boss. But I'm appealing to, I don't want you, anyone in my groups on Facebook or that's a part of the show, don't threaten these people. Okay? Don't take up arms against Nick Valenti and D.A. Roberts, because Nick Valenti and D.A. Roberts are very close personal friends of mine. I will work with them. I've always worked with them. I will continue to work with them. They will be a part of my, just like they have for the last few years. All three of those gentlemen were at my conference. And I was told by Nick and Jody, who have not been able to speak to one another because they've been going back and forth, that they would be willing tomorrow to have a phone conversation and talk. Okay? And they can work separately, but amicably. Okay? They don't have to be friends, but they don't have to be enemies either. Okay, and everybody's lamenting the demise of NADP. Jody will have NADP. Nick has the IDP. Okay, International Dogman Project. That's his deal. Him and a few of the other guys. Eugene Davis, who was one of the founding members of the North American Dogman Project, has gone to start that with Nick, along with Keith Van Rensselaer and several other people. The list too long to name. Art Vyers, who's the regional director here in Texas. He's my friend. He lives here in Austin. We've eaten dinner together. Art's a good guy. We've covered stories together. Here's the thing. It's a good organization, and I think the IDP will be too. D.A. Roberts was somebody that I had talked to Jody and recommended as the Midwest director. I did that myself, having reservations about the person that was in charge up there, who was doing and saying things toward my friend Linda up until her death. So, I want to broker a peace between them. I want to be able to continue to deal with both organizations, share information, because it benefits you, the listener of the show, that I have to do this for you. I have to do this for my friends, Nick and Jody, but I also have to do this for you because I want you guys to be able to get the information. I want to be able to share information with my friends in both of those organizations. And believe it or not, this could be a good thing for everybody because, two organizations, both doing their own thing instead of all just focusing on one, whatever, it could be a good thing. We'll see what happens. But, for right now, the hate towards Nick and DA has to stop. If I see it, I'm going to confront it. People want there to be issues, whatever, and some people don't like Jody, some people don't like Nick. But it's like you have to choose between one or the other. No, you don't. This isn't a divorce. You don't have to choose one of the parents. You can be friends with both. Okay? And I'm telling you right now, what you need to do is shut up, sit back, and wait and see what happens with this, okay? And then I'll give you the 411. If one of them is being difficult and doesn't want to cooperate, then that's on them. But all we can do is just try to keep the peace between the two groups and let them be amicable. Nick has reached across the aisle. He told me tonight. At first he was like, I'm not talking to this guy. I don't want anything to do with this guy. Now he's like, hey, we'll talk. We need to talk. We need to, Jody said the same thing tonight. So there is the stepping stone right there. Okay, we've gotten that far. So let's stop with the hate. Please do it for me. That being said, I want to move on to another issue. We are going to have the conference in September. That's definitely going to happen. Talked to Ken about it this past week. We don't know exactly what day, but we are going to do it in September in Fort Worth. If you think you would go, let me know. Hit me up because I want to know how many people I'm going to have. We had like 400 something in that place and we filled it up, right, over there in Tennessee. But here's the thing. Between now and September, a lot of people could change their minds. But once we put it up on Eventbrite and you buy your tickets, last year I did people a service by saying, hey, there were a bunch of people who said I couldn't go. I gave them their money back. We cannot do that this year. We have too much going on, and you may get stuck with that ticket. Now, if you want to resell it to someone, that's different. I mean, a few people made deals and did that. And then there were people that just showed up at the door, and there was a line when we got there at the door. Somebody says your thoughts on the Confessionals channel. You two should connect more often on like-minded topics. Yeah, me and Tony are both very busy. Me and Tony Merkel are good friends. I think I talked to him about 2 weeks ago or something like that. And I'm good friends with Josh Pinocchio from What Lurks Beneath, and me and him just talked about a week ago. And we are talking about collaborations. I'm going to be having some collabs coming up. Chris Garitano is going to be coming to Texas and probably going to be in the studio. Josh is going to be in the studio in March, I think. And hopefully Tony will be too, and sometime in March or in the summer. So we are close. We're friends. We work together. We throw information out to each other. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. A lot of people say, "Oh, Josh Turner has fights with everybody." Blah blah blah. That was a one little group of cabal of people who were spreading that out, making it look like I was fighting with everyone. No, and that same cabal of people, they initiated the fight between me and Marvin. That same cabal. Okay. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 of them, or about 4, I guess, and they do what they do. Everywhere I go, they show up and they try to troll me, and they've kind of backed off now because we've blocked them out of everything. But they were doing all kinds of stuff, and every time I've had an issue with anyone, even a little bit, they exploited it and tried to go in and needle it. But I made peace with people who they were pushing. Roger was one of them. Abe was one of them. And these people were pushing them to fight me, to get into it with me. And Marvin, too. And I'm friends with Marvin, Roger, and Abe now. And they see, just like I do, who started it, where it came from, who the troublemakers were. These people, they have a vested interest in trying to make my life miserable. And there's one guy in particular who's probably one of the worst people in this field. And I'm not talking about... what's his face over at Encounters? That guy he's going to be what he is. I backed off from him. People saying, oh, he dumped Wolf because blah, 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 blah. No, he didn't. I left because I didn't want to be around somebody who was like him. They have made friends because they're all in this little cabal, whatever. And there's a woman up in Wisconsin who's friends with them because she hates me. Attacked me when I did my action figure line, has attacked me many times. Let those few people go and just sit in their kettle and stew. Who cares? We're moving on. The Paranormal Roundtable train goes this way. They're going to go that way and eventually go that way because that's all that happens is you go down. And I don't just mean into inner earth like we're going to talk about tonight later with my guest. No, I mean you go down. Okay. You will go down. Okay. It's from Stilling Harvard. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a good movie. It's funny. Go check it out. I mean, you remember that movie, Anthony?
Yeah, it's a classic.
My bottom lip is so chapped. Oh my gosh. So I have some stories here, but let me see if I can find them. They're kind of backed up here in my deal here. Oh, man. So last week we talked about a story, and I have time for one story before we get our guest on, and then we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. And we talked about the man from the closet. Well, I got another weird story for you. And then when Sabella came on, we talked about the Dogman werewolf thing with the Bigfoot on the roof of the people's house. This is a weird one. I got 2. Now, I can tell the ghost story or I can tell the Dogman story. So let's get on here on the chat and let's take a vote. And we'll see how many people we get here because I got about 20 minutes before I can do this. Dogman, dude, Dogman. Everybody's wanting the Dogman. Okay. So the ghost story is really good too. I'm just saying. Dogman. Everybody's wanting Dogman. Ghost, Dogman. Okay. We'll talk about the Dogman. I have a friend who does security. He does security in Arkansas. And oddly enough, this area, which is really interesting to me because he heard me talking about it about the Beast of Boggy Creek, which is actually Lyle Blackburn's area of expertise. When we were driving through there, Lyle was telling us all about it, and he was talking about the what was it that the murderer from Texarkana, wasn't it? Yeah, and he was showing us the park and all this stuff. He did a deep dive into all that. So we were talking about all that stuff. About Lyle Blackburn. He's a good friend of mine. So anyway, if you haven't read his books, really good work. He was an English major. A lot of people don't know that. That's why he's so good at writing. And he was showing us, so we were driving through there. And so this happened literally right outside of Texarkana. And this happened in 1980. Not 82. I'm sorry. No, I'm thinking of two different things. It was 2002. 2002, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2002, this guy was a security guard in Texarkana. And he was working at a hotel. And he said he was walking around the back of the hotel. Thank you for that donation, Curtis. He says the conference was amazing. So if you can make the second one, definitely should. I'm going to try my best to make it. So if you can do it if you can too. Besides, I always wanted to visit Texas. Double win. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Thank you for that donation. Donations are not expected, but they are very appreciated, folks. They really do help the show and keep us going. Patreon.com/PRT podcast. You can go and join Patreon. If you join the Patreon, you can, $20 tier, you can get a swag bag from us with some PRT merch. We load it up and we send it to you. Or you can do $10 tier for 3 months, and then you get a swag bag. It's up to you, however you want to do it. And then you hit me up and you let me know. Look, last week we had giveaways, and we'll talk about that later, but we're going to do them again this week. But people didn't give me their information. I only got one person's information. So, and then another person from the week before who gave me their information. But I need to get your information. So anyway, thank you for the donation. We appreciate it more than you could possibly know right now. Here's the thing. Josh Turner at PRTpodcast.com. Send me your stories. And if you think you have something that's show worthy, we can put it on the live or maybe do a pre-record, which we haven't been doing much of lately because we've been so busy. Let me know. But anyways, back to the story. The guy, he was working at a hotel, and I can't remember exactly which one he said it was, but it was on the edge of town. It was 2002. And he said it was a rundown hotel, and he worked there for several months. And one of the guests the week before this happened said that there was a weird-looking wolf-like creature who was standing in front of their vehicle when they went around the back of the hotel to go into their vehicle. They reported that. Now, they didn't have a camera right there to say, hey, this is what it was or whatever. War Criminal says, I sent it to your website. Don't send it to my website. Send it to my email address. Okay, so anyway, when this guy was walking around the back one night, about a week after he had heard this, one of his neighbors had claimed, literally the night before, that something was on the other side of the fence moving behind his house in his backyard, and he could see by the light of the moon. It was a full moon. He said he could see by the light of the moon. I don't know if that means anything, but that it was a werewolf-looking type creature. And he was like, his neighbor told him that. And he thought, that's weird. A person from the hotel who was staying there had mentioned that there was a dog-like or wolf-like type creature standing on its hind legs over his car when he was walking out to his vehicle. And he went back inside and told him, hey, there's something out there. And this guy was kind of freaked out. The security guard that worked that night, he wasn't the guard. It was a different guard. But then that person the next day told him, when he came in, what had happened the night before. And then they checked out the next day and they were gone. The thing that was so interesting about that, thank you for this donations, Madeline and Grace. We thank you so much. That it happened in Texarkana, which I've gotten stories outside of Texarkana in the wooded area outside Texarkana and all through Arkansas and the Ozarks, all the way across that state, all the way into Tennessee. You get all kinds of weird stories from the Ozarks up into Missouri. you know. But this particular creature was tall. It was a grayish black color. Now, mine when I say it was black with maybe like a smoke bit of color to it, which maybe still to this day I don't know if that's just from the little bit of light that was out there that made it look like that, or if it was just black. My buddy said it was black. I don't know, but this one was more gray. And the interesting thing about it was at dusk. Both times when his neighbor saw what he saw, and when this person saw this thing looming over their car right out on the edge of the woods, they were like, it was gray. Grayish black. Now, I don't know if that is like the color of what I'm wearing. I don't know. I didn't get they didn't draw me a picture. But he said it looked grayish black from the descriptions that they gave. Now, here's the weird thing. Not that this isn't already weird. This is already weird because it's a Dogman creature or whatever. He was doing his rounds. He was on the top floor, and he looks down, and he sees this thing running around in the parking lot, kind of running and stopping and kind of sitting up. He said it had a very primate-like movement to it. Now, this isn't like unheard of. This isn't unusual. This is something that happens pretty regularly. You will get stories, and they will have a movement about them that looks primate. Like there was one in Round Rock. I know the video. Remember they showed us the video?
Yeah.
And it looked kind of like a primate moving, but you could tell that with the ears pointed up that it had to be a Dogman.
Yeah, it didn't have a primate head.
No. Now people would say gugwe, but this thing, I don't think it was a gugwe. What a gugwe is, folks, if you're uninitiated, go learn about it. Go ask somebody. I'm kidding. I'm joking. No, if you don't know what a gugwe is, it's what people are saying is like a Bigfoot body with like a wolf-like head, okay, with straight legs. What that is, your guess is as good as mine. They call it the gugwe. That's all I know. I did a deep dive on it with a guy I used to work with on here. So you can go and listen to that show, whatever. This thing had a very wolf-like head to it. He said it absolutely. He goes, at first I thought it was like a dude wearing a werewolf head mask. And he said, I was staring at it and I was in disbelief. And he goes, I was not expecting to be doing my rounds and see that thing. It was in the parking lot. So he goes down the stairs, brave guy, radios to the front desk. The front desk guy, he said was a pretty big guy, he was actually bigger guy than him, and said that if that guy should probably been doing security, he should have been at the front desk. But that guy closed the front, went around the back with him with a pistol. Both of them were armed, and they went down there. And he goes, I was going to confront this dude. He goes, I go down there, I get, ground level with him. And he goes, at that point, I was like, this is a werewolf. He said it wasn't gray at all. Well, the one he saw was black and hairy. And I asked him, now this is another question you have to ask people. Was it more like human hair, or was it more like wolf hair fur? What would be considered to be like fur? And he said, dude, it was both. That's odd, right, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, hi, everybody.
Unfortunately, Tony's here. But so what was this thing? All we can do is get what the witness said. This is what he said. He said this thing was sitting with its, like a dog, like wood, with its legs, out in the front of it. Then he lifted what he thought were paws, and he saw fingers unfurl. When he saw that, he was like, this is not a primate. This is not a dog. This is not a wolf. This is something else. When his friend from the front desk came around the building, brandishing a firearm, this thing stood up. Ears went like straight up. Big, tall ears. We've heard that before. Stands up. Get this. His friend starts freaking out. And he's like, oh my gosh, oh, and he's like, he's shaking. And he's like frozen in fear. The yell from his friend startled this thing. One of the people down on the downstairs opens the door to the building, comes out, looks, and sees this thing, and they're like, oh my gosh. And it's a husband and wife getting ready to go eat dinner. Ooh. And they see it, and there's 4 people just staring at it in disbelief. This thing takes off running. He said it was so fast. He said it wasn't like a blur. He said it was just like really quickly. And went in between 2 cars and was up a little in the embankment, down an embankment and gone.
Ruined date night.
Like it was like up and down into the ditch or whatever, and it was gone. This happened in 2002. Now, I've been to Texarkana multiple times. I don't know what hotel that was because I don't have it in my notes. I have it at the house, but we were in such a hurry when we left, me and Anthony were going over this before we left. But we had so much going on that I didn't grab my notes. But folks, I apologize about that. Look, anyways, that wasn't the end of it. That was not the end of it. He said that happened on a Thursday. On Saturday, okay, because he worked Thursday through Sunday. He said on Saturday he was back at that hotel, and at this point he was freaking out. He was doing his rounds, and he hears like growling and moving through the brush, and this thing comes out from behind a bush. He said at this point, he goes, dude, I had one of those big Econo cans of like big ones of the pepper spray. I believe it was the MK4 is what he was using, is what he said. If you're in security or police or EMS, you would know that the MK4 is a pretty powerful one, So he unloaded on this thing. And he said that this thing reacted, because canids' noses are 1,000,000 times stronger than a human's, like a canid would. It kind of rolled back and it fell backwards. He said it wasn't being aggressive, but he just instinctively was like, dude, this thing's right there. I don't want it on my property. And so it took off into the woods. He ran back inside, told the front desk guy, put it in his report. Here's the weird thing. About 2 years later, he was working, doing security at not a truck stop, convenience store in another town. And he started dating this girl. She and him started going over their history of jobs and where they had worked and what they had done. And he said, I worked security at this place, that place. And when he mentioned the hotel, she had a funny thing to tell him. She said, when I was a kid, she's like, me and my older sister and my mom, we thought that we saw Bigfoot outside of that. We stayed at that hotel one time because her dad was abusive. And so they had to leave to go stay in a hotel. It was a sad story, but she said, we thought we saw Bigfoot right out by the end of the parking lot. And she said that we argued about it forever because my little sister was like, no, it had a muzzle, And the mom was like, so what was it, a werewolf? And then now, they're dating. This is like 2004, whatever. And he says, dude, I'm convinced that it was a werewolf. A friend of his that lived in his neighborhood, because he didn't live far from that hotel, had said that there was a guy that lived in their neighborhood at the end of the street and whose house had literally was falling apart and it had to be condemned or something back in the 90s. I don't know the whole story. That he had gone to live in the woods. And he told several people that was him, that he was the one that was running around and that he just grown his hair out and people were saying that he looked like Bigfoot or a werewolf. And I asked this guy, I said, is there any possible way that you misconstrued this and this was a Bigfoot Dogman guy that looked like Oat Willie? Anybody doesn't know who Oat Willie is? That's the very Freak Brothers. It's the old, hippie cartoon guy. Old prospector looking dude, but they're always smoking pot. Which I don't condone or condemn one way or the other, folks. I'm just, we're not here to get into that. Look, this guy said that guy was like, yeah, he took credit for it. And I don't remember if he said it was like in the paper or the news or something. Like he said that the sightings were him, and he was a big shaggy haired guy. And he was big. And he was a hairy guy. He said there's no way in hell.
What is he though? I mean,
He was like 6'2". He said he was
guys?
tall, like 6'2". The guy told me he was about 6'2", 250 pounds. He was a big guy. But he said that the guy was living out in the woods, and he was taking credit for having been all these sightings. Funny thing is, that guy's ex-girlfriend had a really strange story. She actually supposedly did a police report for the sheriff's department in the next town over, and she said that it was that guy. She's like, yes, my ex-boyfriend, that's him. She said that he could literally shapeshift, which makes the story even more bizarre.
Yeah.
So that's what this guy's telling me, and he said, look, she absolutely told several people, and the word got out that this guy was actually involved in all kinds of stuff, and that he could actually manipulate and make himself look like whatever he wanted. And the rub was, and the weirdest part about this story, of course, this is what the guy told me. He's like, all I know is what I saw, is what he told me. I can't speak for the veracity of these other statements from these other people. It's hearsay, And it was so weird, to me. And he said, I personally don't believe that. He's like, I don't know what this guy was doing or whatever, but the fact that he's like his mother, or I guess what would be now his mother-in-law, had talked to this woman because she worked with her briefly. And she said, yeah, that he could shapeshift, and that at times his skin would be scaly and hard. And I'm like, well, like plaque psoriasis? She's like, no.
Like a lizard?
Yeah. Absolutely. I have another story that's very similar to that out of Las Vegas. And I don't want to get into that one because I'm going to bring my guest on, because my guest can maybe shed some light on this story. This will lead us into talking to him. We're going to get him on the phone. And what I want to tell you, too, don't forget, because I have a really good ghost story. I'm going to bring that one to you either after he's done, depends on how long we go with him. If it doesn't go that long, then we'll tell the ghost story. If not, then I will tell it after he's on, and then we're going to do the giveaways. Okay? Here's the deal, guys. If you were picked last week, hit me up. Let me know. I don't care if you've already given me your information. Give it to me again and say, hey, I haven't got anything, dude. What's going on here? So I can get it to you, because I feel obligated to give stuff away. I'm Crazy Eddie over here. I'm giving stuff away. Isn't that how the obnoxious car? What is that guy here that everybody hates? I don't say his name. Probably sue us.
Oh yeah, I was about to.
The car salesman?
Yeah.
Yeah, the one with the commercials.
Oh, yeah.
That guy. Hey, we're doing a car sale over here. Hey, my head just came off. Ah!
Can't believe that guy's still in business.
It's insane.
And then the other guy, if you can't afford our car, I'm just going to give it to you. So I had people that actually went and tried to do that. He didn't give it to them.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
Wow. Why are you lying on your commercials, sir?
It's like Catches was never supposed to close.
It's like, I got to tell you, we're bankrupt.
Yeah.
So folks, I'm gonna come right back. Give me 1 second, and I'm gonna work on something techno, and it'll take me 2 minutes, and then we're gonna move this camera over, and we're gonna get started. We're gonna bring our guest on, and we are going to talk. Be right back. And we're back. Let me get on this call here. Hello?
Hi, Josh. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, James?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo, but I think I can work with this.
I got a fan buzzing in the background. If it's creating a hum, I'll turn it off.
That might help. Let me see if I can get
Okay.
back to the...
Sounds like you're a little bit far away from your microphone.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a little bit far away from the microphone there.
I'm hoping that I was trying to make sure it was going to come out of my headset mic instead of the webcam. Are you hearing me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. I can't see the live feed.
Could you hear that tapping?
Yeah.
Okay, then it's coming out of my headset. Okay, I'll see if I can turn up the sound levels at this end. Okay, I'll just talk louder. If
Yeah,
that'll help at all.
I think we got you. Can folks at home, y'all can comment and tell me whether or not you can hear James. Because we have a lot of stuff to talk about here.
Oh, cool.
Yep. They say you're sounding fun.
Okay, they got you. All right, James. So
Cool.
let me introduce you. James Bartley, and you live in Australia, right, James?
Yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
and you do a lot of work. We've been friends for a long time, and we've talked back and forth over the years. But it just you're somebody that I was watching on a video the other day, and I said, "Man, I need to get in touch with this guy because you did a very, very good presentation." And I can't remember what conference that was you were at, but you did a long presentation on the reptilian agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw your work, and I was like, man, we've been friends, like I said, on Facebook for a while, and we talked here and there, but I really was excited to talk to you and get you on the show. So let me ask you the first question to get the ball rolling here. How did you get involved in, like, just give me, like, tell us how did you get involved in this?
I've always had an interest. From a boy, I was always interested in what they call the paranormal, UFOs, Bigfoot, Bermuda Triangle, other dimensions, et cetera, et cetera. And I had a number of psychic experiences, UFO sightings. I didn't put it all together until much later. So the interest level was always there. It was only when I had a series of experiences, culminating in 1990. I had about a week and a half, 2 weeks of just boom, boom, boom experiences, one after the other. That forced me to go into investigator mode, because either that or I would like curl up in a fetal position, So I really started hitting the books, because back then, as you know, all we really had were books and magazine articles and what have you, newsletters. So I just started reading everything I could. Eventually moved to San Diego, which was the best thing I could have done, because they had a well-organized UFO research community there, and I got plugged directly into hardcore investigations in the high desert of Southern California involving reptilians, the military, I mean, you name it. The researchers there were right on it, and I just plugged myself into that network. And then over the years, I continued to have my own experiences. I wrote a few treaties here and there that went out on the internet, but I was encouraged to get a podcast going. And so that's what I've been doing the last, several years. Just, I had Jody Cook on the show. I had, the late great Miss Godfrey and other people. So, and I've had my own Dogman experiences too, which I haven't really talked much about. So in a nutshell, it was the experiences more than anything that compelled me to get involved in the research investigative side. And off and on, the experiences still go on. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things you were saying on that particular video, and for my audience, if you could go on a little bit about how you got into the whole reptilian thing, like what led you down the rabbit hole? Like I know what led me and what leads a lot of people, but for you personally, what led you down the rabbit hole to where you were like, okay, there is an agenda here, and it goes back to this, and one of the listeners of mine had sent me a message one day and was saying, hey, I started listening to you because my wife listens to you, and you had talked about your encounter with what you thought was a reptilian and blah, 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 which I think it was, and I had a lot of people that could back me up on that. But his wife was like saying, you know, that she believed in it wholeheartedly. Well, he was a little bit, I don't know what the word would be, like persnickety about it. And he was like, well,
Cynical?
Cynical, yeah. But he was a little cocky about it, you know?
Oh.
But he was like, yeah, well, if the reptilians are real, then how are we able to talk about them if they're, you know, and because whoever's in charge, you're not really going to be able to talk about it, blah, blah, blah. I said, because one thing, it's easier to hide in plain sight because it's so ridiculous to some people if you talk to them about a reptilian or a shapeshifter or any type of, you know, something, they're going to think you're crazy. And 90% of the people out there are not going to be willing to listen right off the cuff and go, okay, this guy, you know, what are you talking about? Lizard people, you know, inner earth? Like, what is this? You know, nobody's going to really just flock to that automatically because it's so obscene, so unreal. It's an aberration to them. They're not going to, you know, it's just like, whatever, I can't even see this or hear this, you know. And so it's very easy for this to fly under the radar because, you know, let's be honest, who the hell wants to believe in an agenda of a reptilian race of beings? I mean, right, James? I mean, what do you think?
Well, yes, because for decades, the subject of reptilians was the bastard child of ufology. Most alleged alien abduction researchers wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. In fact, some of the biggest names in ufological history in the abduction field were totally dismissive of the subject. Now, with me, how I got into it was I was having a discussion with Sean Atlanti, the founder of the San Diego UFO Society, after I joined. And he brought up the subject of the reptilians and how there was a lot of reptilian activity in the high desert of Southern California, the Ridge Crest, China Lake, Barstow areas, and people that are in the high desert of Southern California know what I'm talking about. Very spooky place, going back centuries. But when he mentioned that there was a lot of reptilian activity there, women reporting being sexually assaulted by reptilians, military involvement, my ears perked up. And at a deep intuitive level, I knew that he was really onto something. And then, as fate would have it, a little further down the track, I was introduced to Barbara Bartholic. Now, her first and foremost protege was the late, great Dr. Carla Turner, who was also a personal friend of mine. And we knew her as Candy Turner because her middle name was Candace. So Candy Turner was a friend of mine, and she always spoke highly of Barbara Bartholic, saying that, you know, Barbara knew way more times, more knowledge-wise than 10 abduction researchers put together. So in the way she edified Barbie and talked about the research they were doing together, and also apart, you know, because as you pointed out in the intro, well, you know, what seems to be a division or breakup, no, that could be twice as much work, right? And people need to look at it from that glass half full standpoint, because after a while, Candy broke off and did her own research apart from Barbara Bartholic, but they complemented each other. And so through a series of synchronicities, I was introduced directly to Barbara Bartholic, and we began talking weekly on the phone. I was briefing her on everything I knew in the desert Southwest, the Tri-States area, California, Arizona, Nevada, and in New Mexico, Colorado, because by then I developed my own network. And she was filling me in on what was going on in Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, mega alien abduction country, those states. And so we became close colleagues. And then Barbie briefed me about everything she knew. She just sowed her knowledge and wisdom into me. I didn't take it all on board. You know, I verified a lot of this stuff that she told me on my own, from my own experiences and my own interactions with other abductees who'd had reptilian encounters and other investigators who were into the reptilian subject. Now, what's interesting, Josh, is that the only real allies we had, which we didn't really interact with back in the day, were the so-called cryptozoologists. They were the only ones, aside from hardcore alien abduction researchers, that were interested in reptilians, right? So, you know, there was a number of so-called inner Earth researchers I knew. There was a number of cryptozoologists I knew, and they were deeply into the reptilian subject. I think, you know, I'm not saying there was a division of work or anything, or division of labor, but from my standpoint, my colleague's standpoint, we were more interested in what happened in the houses, what happened also in the underground bases, which the cryptozoologists also delved into, right? Because you talked about in the intro, the underground base aspect, which goes back through time immemorial, just down through the ages. Every culture in the world has stories about a subterranean creatures, subterranean civilizations. Michael Mott's done great work in this regard, and others. You go back to the Shaver mysteries, all that stuff, and myself and the inner Earth researchers and the like, we were all into that stuff back in the day. So
let me say something about the Shaver mystery. What he's talking about, Shaver mystery, he's talking about a book, or not a book. It's a story called "I Remember Lemuria," and it was in the Amazing Stories issues. I think in 1954. I think it was.
Yes.
And this guy Shaver. And subsequently, he became friends with a guy named Parmer, who was the editor-in-chief of Amazing Stories. And they went down the rabbit hole of this guy's abduction and his enslavement and his escape from Inner Earth at the hands of what he called a race of beings known as the Darrow. And that, the late, great Britton Solomon, a good friend of mine, told us the story of his encounter with what he believed to be a Darrow that came through his wall one night with this. They have this ability, and they are a subterranean race. And what Bartley is saying is 100% correct. Not to cut you, to interrupt, but to add to what you're saying, you are talking about these different civilizations like Agartha, Shangri-La, Shambhala, Mount Shasta, the Lemuria, all these different places. There are all these different openings in these cities of these different underground inner Earth civilizations, which I wholeheartedly, fully believe in. And people will tell me that I'm wacko, but I'm like, you know what? Every culture has a story of these things, and our world is 100,000 times older than we think it is. And there have been multiple incursions into our area of operation, I guess you should say, from multiple either ETs or ultra-terrestrials, interdimensionals, and a lot of them have gone underground because to a lot of these species, our sun is they can't handle it, so they go underground. But anyway, go ahead and continue, James. I'm sorry to cut. I just wanted to add about the Shaver mystery. It's very interesting stories. The guy talked about it for years.
Yes, and there's other works, like what's considered the first fantasy or even science fiction novel, quote unquote, was The Coming Race by Edward Bulwer Lytton, who was he was a mystic and he was a parliamentarian in England back in the day. And he wrote a book about a couple of miners. It was kind of like a joy trip. They were just going to go spelunking for a while, but something happens. The guide who was going to bring the young kid underground, he falls to his death as they're crawling into the tunnel. And as he's looking down into the tunnel, he sees the body of his friend, the guide, being dragged away by a reptilian creature. Mm-hmm. Okay, now this was a book written about 1789, right? And right there, talking about reptilians. Another thing also people don't understand, but a lot of the people that were into the Shaver mysteries, Agartha and the like, they knew about this, the inner Earth studies, that back in the day, in England, Cornwall, places like that, Czechoslovakia, where people did a lot of mining, back in the day, they signed, everyone that was employed to work the mines, signed what we would now call a non-disclosure statement. Why? They were told, if you see something down there you can't explain or scares the hell out of you, you keep your mouth shut if you want to work anywhere, right? We're not just going to fire you. We're going to make sure you don't work anywhere. So why do they have these, non-disclosure statements about the stuff that goes underground? It's because there's civilizations down there, and there's hordes of creatures. The Russians have done great work. Paul Stonehill's talked a lot about this, about the investigations the Russian military and scientific community have done to undersea and under lake alien or civilizations of one sort or another. People have to realize that some of these so-called aliens have been here so long in underground bases. Is it even accurate to call them aliens anymore? If their bases, if their bases preceded the founding of the United States by thousands of years, and they come and go, and they seem to have a mastery of time. And another quick point about the native lore. You go to places like, it doesn't matter what the detractors say. The Native Americans, the Apaches that live in the Jicarilla Apache Reservation near Dolce, their stories about beings coming out of the ground and kidnapping women and children. This goes back centuries, long before the Spanish showed up. So when we talk about reptilians, we talk about underground civilizations that some of them, or beings that seem to have a predatory nature to them, they're not just whistling Dixie. And this is where the twain meet. The modern extension of that was, of course, with the advent of all these saucer recoveries, alien spacecraft recoveries, going back at least as far as 1941 or 42, Cape Girardeau, Missouri. They've had that long to develop the Sub Rosa back engineering program, and they were always working underground anyway. So it would come as no surprise over time, Josh, if the deep black military, Rand had the study going back to the 60s, where they were talking about using the subterranean, these nuclear tunnel boring machines to just dig tunnel systems all over the world, right? They were already talking about that scale in the 1960s. Well, at some point, they're going to run into other people or other beings down there in their tunneling excursions. So, people need to keep this point in mind, that these beings, some of them come here from other star systems, some of them have lived underground for eons, essentially, and others come and go. And some get here through Stargates, some through portals, and some get here with craft, right? So, that's what I'm into, is how the reptilians manage through genetic hybridization, genetic engineering, the creation of religions. At one point, there were only two religions generally on planet Earth: heliocentricity, i.e. sun worship, and serpent worship. Those are pretty much the only two. And one could argue there were two sides of the same coin, because in heliocentricity, they often did sacrifices to appease their sun god. So what we're talking about is a system that has been set up, and we're seeing the last few years, and it really kicked in during the Vietnam War. We're seeing the rollout of the reptilian overlordship. They decided on this occasion, this time around, we're not going to do the old-fashioned invasion thing. What we're going to do is we're just going to slowly build up over time. We're going to hybridize large chunks of the population, put our hybridized assets in place in all the key positions, and then just re-engineer, reinvent education, medicine, everything else, and whammo, that's where we're at now.
Yeah, what you were saying earlier about Linton, it goes back a long ways, and Linton, he was writing about this in the 1700s, and he
Yes.
but he did the same thing that Shaver and Palmer did. They kind of presented it like in a story form, like it was a novel, but he was talking about a real event that really happened.
Yes.
And people they misconstrue that, and they do that now in movies and stuff. People talk about V.
Yes.
Here's the thing. Have you read I Am the Man? I don't know if
No,
you
I
remember
haven't read that book.
Okay. Well,
No.
we're not going to get into that one then. Go look it up. It was written by a guy who was taken, and I don't think it was Linton. It was another guy, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But he wrote a book, and he calls himself I Am the Man. And I Am the Man is he goes underground, and there again, it's like 8 years or something like that, and he's gone, and he's taken underground with this reptilian type creature that sounds a lot like, it looks and the description of it sounds an awful lot like a crawler, like a pale humanoidal crawler.
Yes.
And they do all this different weird stuff, and they go into the inner earth, and they explore all these different parts of the inner earth. And the guy goes into all these different levels and all these different, and there are multiple species down there.
Yes.
And they're not all friends either. Now, there is war between them, just like with the Tarot and the Darrow. The reason that they're at war is because they're neighbors. Well, it's like I said, if you look at the Quran, or if you look at the Hadith, whatever, with the Muslims, they have an entity they call the jinn. It says that the jinn have many neighbors. Okay? It doesn't go into great detail about who and what those neighbors are, but you're kind of left to wonder, or ponder, what is that? Well, when you read in Genesis, like I've said to many, many people, I believe that Genesis is sort of a timeline for multiple different, periods that like Genesis 11, I believe, was a destruction. Like I said last week on the show, it was a destruction of a Stargate. I believe that that's what that was, the Tower of Babel. And I believe that these different species and whatever alien intelligences have knocked us down to level 0 many times because they have a vested interest in keeping us dumbed down. When we get too high, they have to knock us down, and we're just smart enough to be really dangerous. We pollute the earth. We do all kinds of bad things. And if anybody knows anything about the Anunnaki, they are not loved universally. They're just giant species of us. And they had war with the Reptilians a long time ago. And they've been at war with them, with one particular species known as the Draco. That is the quote-unquote word, that is how people, that's what they say. And I don't just mean they as in random people. I mean researchers and military personnel. A lot of people that I've actually been able to speak to know that there is certain species that are at war with one another. There is another species of humanoids known as the Nordics, and they inhabit what we believe is the North Pole area. That was, if anybody knows about Admiral Byrd, to the day he died, he never retracted what he said. There was an inner earth, and the inner earth, I believe, is where you're going to find a lot of your answers. Like just in the Bible, it says that the kingdom of God is found within, not without. And it says that repeatedly, and the Gnostics really push that idea that you have to go inward. And I think that being born again means you do it again physically. I think that as above is below means a lot. I think that when they're talking about above and below, there's two worlds there. The book of Job, it says Satan, it's like, where hast thou been? And he says, I've been walking to and fro up on and within the earth. And a lot of times the shaitan are called serpents. You know, the dragon, the word dragon is mentioned 34 times in the Bible. And when you look at how many times these beings are referenced, it's staggering. I had someone who gave me a ton of information on the Reptilians. That whole booklet they gave me, it was a neighbor friend, it was my brother's friend. He was kind of a crazy old guy. He passed away, but he was kind of out there for me at the time, you know, because he knew I was into the paranormal. And he was interested in our house because we lived in a house that was haunted. Well, he brought me this notebook thingy. It was like a pamphlet, but it was like thick, but not quite a book, all about the reptilian agenda. And this was back in 1999, I believe. And so when he gave me this and I read it, I thought, man, this is crazy. It's something that me and my brother and my friends, we pondered over this many times because we had what we believed was an encounter with a reptilian or a couple of them. And we got to deep enough in to where we realized like that, you know, there's more than one type. And there are types that are from here, terrestrially from here, and then there's extraterrestrial, then there's interdimensional, all different and with different agendas. And supposedly, I don't know if you know about this, James, but the head reptilian of the Dracos claimed that he is actually the king of the world. He calls himself.
Wouldn't surprise me.
James?
Well, in the reptilian scheme of things, the Draco, or some of us call them the Dracs, particularly the white Draco, and some of your listeners' ears probably perked up when I said that, the white Draco. There is very much a caste system, and from what we can understand, myself and my colleagues, that the Draco, particularly the white Draco, seem to be at the top of the heap, but that's not written in stone. We don't know that for sure. There are other beings that probably has made them cosmic vassals. We just don't know the details. But as far as you referenced the Anunnaki before, the wars of gods and men, how often these ET races warred against each other throughout beyond the solar system, underground, and that is at variance with what the New Agers say. The New Agers keep wanting to talk about how all aliens are warm and fuzzy. Well, no, because in the lore, that goes back countless years, some millennia. These gods, or what they called gods back in the day, warred with each other constantly. It's a constant in Norse mythology and the Babylonian epic, the Enuma Elish. I mean, they're just warring against us. Yeah, they shoot for all the marbles, as you know. They play for high stakes, and
they use humans as proxy.
That's right. We are cosmic vassals, essentially. And what I believe happened in a, call it a colonization sense, that for whatever reason, our little corner of the multiverse, and in this solar system in particular, was deemed to be of some significance. So at various points in the distant past, this, that, or the other ET race had brought either themselves as colonizers or genetic hybrids of themselves, or genetically tampered with existing hominoids here. The late great Lloyd Pye talked about that a lot. Mm-hmm. How ETs came and this is throughout the lore once again, genetically uplifted certain simian type hominids or hominoids on this planet and used them as proxies essentially. And we see this in military history throughout the ages, where the Roman Empire would have all these Gallic vassal states, providing their cavalrymen, providing auxiliary soldiers for them to fight their wars, right? Yeah. So humanity, in a sense, as hybridized as it is still a cosmic vassal. And our job is to get out of this cosmic vassal state, stop being the pawns and the playthings of these other beings, right? And I think that we're heading in that direction. There's, generally speaking, I'm seeing a greater understanding amongst even what I call surface level, and I don't mean that in a derogatory, demeaning way, just offhand, surface level researchers who don't delve into the stuff that we do, for example. I think more of them are starting to catch on to the idea that there's a non-human force behind this, because the way it operates, it's so all-encompassing in so many ways. It's just like an all-out assault on the senses, like a blitzkrieg of disinformation, of fear and loathing, and you name it. And the way they normalize all these things we normally think of as heinous or appalling, that's very much the reptilian agenda, right? Now, it's interesting that a guy, Dr. Carl Sagan, he was a memory serves, he was an astronomer out of Cornell. He passed away, but he wrote a book, and he was an arch UFO skeptic in his working career. But there was a reason for that, I feel. He wrote a book called The Dragons of Eden. Subtitle was a study into the origins of human intelligence, or words to that effect. And the title itself is suggestive, The Dragons of Eden. He specifically focused on the reptilian part of the brain, the R complex, from which aggression, territoriality, hierarchies, adherence to hierarchies, etc., factor in. And he said that if we're going to learn anything about the origins of human intelligence, how we came to be what we are, we have to first look at the reptilian brain, the R complex, which is the oldest part of the brain, and it sits atop the brainstem, right? And everything else developed around it, or was grown around it, if you will, genetically. So the fact that a guy,
it holds our base instinct.
It holds our base instincts, but it also holds the key for the reptilian hybrid overlords, or the reptilian overlords rather, to manipulate us. They've hybridized us in such a way that they can press all these hot buttons and get us coming and going, right? Especially people who don't realize that this is going on, because even in the reptilian scheme of things, I mentioned earlier, there's hierarchies. In the underground cavern systems, dominant reptilian civilization societies either annihilate, or if they decide to, they subjugate other reptilians and other non-human beings and make them do their bidding for them. This is why in some of these underground bases run by reptilians, and which Barbara Bartholick and Dr. Carla Turner used to refer to as processing plants. I might get into that later. But in a lot of these large reptilian underground bases and processing plants, there's definitely a division of labor. There's this elite caste. They don't work. They just kind of do the things that they enjoy doing. That there are different worker classes of reptilians that do specific jobs, specific functions, but are definitely down, lower on the totem pole. And you talked about cinema and how we see so much revealed to us. I encourage people to go see the Super Mario Brothers movie, which was an absolute classic in the reptilian story. I'm not going to give it away, spoiler alert, but there's an underground civilization ruled by reptilians. Humans are enslaved. They have electric cars down there, right? And this has been going on. This is a movie that came out in the early mid-90s. And don't let the title fool you, the Super Mario Brothers. It's all about other dimensions, reptilian shape-shifting. You even see the Twin Towers
the
go
whole
down.
mushroom thing. I mean, like even
Exactly.
the guy that, it was the Japanese intention.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you can reach that by taking the mushroom. Like,
Yes.
I talked about that before, and I know you can take different types. Like the Amanita muscara is actually a type for the gnomes. I mean, it's just different levels you can reach by taking these. I'm not telling people to take them. I'm saying that's what they say.
Yes. And a quick point, Josh, people, automatically assume, psilocybin, mushroom taking, that's a human activity. Strictly, no, not necessarily. Because there are beings that live in these underground, cavern systems, including reptilians, who imbibe in that kind of thing, okay?
Sure.
There's a book that my late great friend George Andrews wrote, Drugs and Magic, and he talked about how, in a ceremonial sense, drugs have been used, plant medicine has been used to communicate, interact with the spirit world and entities from the beginning. So why would humans be the only ones that did such things? It makes perfect sense that other beings would do the same thing.
Yeah. What you're saying too, James, and I watched one of your lectures and I was just like enthralled. I was like, wow. And I'm sitting there, and my wife always says when I'm watching someone's lecture or I'm studying something, and I was doing a dive on that at that time. And I don't even know how I came across your video. I mean, you've been in a bunch of different videos and shows. But I was watching that and I was shaking my head and I was finishing your sentences. And my wife's like, you got to get that guy on the show. And I said, I know him. She's like, oh my gosh. But she's like, used to be impressed by it. Now she's like, well, you know all these people. But I was like, I know him and I'm going to get him on the show. So Tony, you were in like the next room and I said, come here. And you came in and I showed you James on the TV. And I said, this is a guy who I got to break bread with. I got to get him on the show. We got to talk. We got to, I would love to work with you in person. I wish I could get you over here.
Absolutely. And you know what? Because we have a meeting on the minds there, because one of your correspondents, I was listening to this paranormal roundtable discussion with you guys, and one of your correspondents, I think from England, if memory serves, wrote in and said that he'd spied in a forest clearing, like a craftland, reptilians get out, and they were returning like a comatose dogman. Right. Mm-hmm. And see, if you remember that story, my ears perked up, because there's a similar dynamic with Sasquatch. Yeah, we call them what they will. I mean, the great Jorge Martin of Puerto Rico, his witnesses have told him, they've seen these Palladian-looking beings, like blonde hair, fair in appearance, et cetera, get out of a craft, and they seem to have a Sasquatch type being under their thrall, basically under complete mind control, doing their bidding robotically, right? So, and we know about the long-standing connection between, lack of a better term, flying saucers, alien craft, and these big hairy hominoids. So why not the Dogman, especially when you look at the lore once again of how some of these wolf-type beings were described as having originated in other star systems. The Sirius system comes up a lot in these discussions, right? Where that's where some of them at least seem to come, may have come from, and may have, did hybridization, who knows, or someone did hybridization on their behalf. We don't know, because there seems to be different types of dogmen, as you know. I mean, in my dreams, I've had this, chow-headed dogman show up, right? And then you were talking about a gray dogman earlier. I saw a gray dogman on all fours. You trot right by me when I drove slowly by it. And I told Jody Cook about this, and that was definitely a dogman. I didn't know that the term existed back then. This would have been 2006. to me, it was a cryptid of some kind, looked like a wolf, But the point being is that there's been a lot of seeding, not just of humans and human hybrids, but of all these different types of beings throughout. Because every time that there's a reset with a series of celestially driven cataclysms, somehow, some way, the oceans get repopulated, the land masses get repopulated with animals, right? It seems to happen every time. But now, the way things are going, the way that the all-out attack on the environment is, which we're being blamed for, of course, it just seems like someone or something wants to wipe the slate clean and just replace it with something else.
Mm-hmm. I want to answer somebody brave, and it says Reptilian Overlord. Where's he coming up with all this? I'm going to tell you right now, Brave, James Bartley is not he didn't just wake up and go, you know what, I'm going to write a science fiction story and I'm going to starring the Reptilians. No. James has done a lot of work on this and a lot of research. And like he said earlier in the program, he started out in the UFO fields. And you mentioned Jody earlier. Yeah, Jody did too. You both guys were in the UFO fields before you moved into other directions, whatever. The thing is, this is information, like we were saying earlier, like the book that was written by Linton, and then the book that was the story by Shaver. These are all stories that have been passed down in modern times, but it goes back way back into ancient antiquity. And if you go to the Sumerian tablets, and you decipher the Sumerian tablets, like Von Daniken and Stitchin and all these other people, Stitchin says the same thing. There is a record of these Anunnaki beings and these reptilians having clashed with them, and there were wars, multiple wars that took place over this planet. And to tell you why, this planet's rich in resources and it's habitable, and you can build a race of biological workers, which we were, to get those resources, to mine for gold and multiple other things that they needed around their planets and where they're from. And he says electric cars. What he's talking about is that's a little different. What we're talking about is like they needed it, like according to the lore, that they needed these resources for their atmosphere and different things like that. Now, when the conquistadors came into the New World, to put it in layman terms, they were predominantly from the region of Spain that was rougher terrain. They didn't have they were lower level nobles at best and peasants at worst. And in order to go and become to not be the proletariat and to be the patrician class, they had to go somewhere else and conquer and take over. And then they would just pay, tribute to the king of Spain. So they went to different places. That's why the Philippines is called, it's because King Philip of Spain. So what they did was they went and they colonized these other regions, the New World, all these different places, and they conquered in the name of Spain. And they set themselves up as like these Ephiats that were like the kings and queens and whatever of those feudal lands that they had conquered, because they would never have achieved that level of nobility where they're from. These beings may have come from some other place where it was the same thing. They sent out their people to go and conquer, and they just stayed and colonized and took over and said, we're the rulers now. We're the leaders of this world. And it happened over and over and over again. And like I said before, that doesn't take away from my belief in God and Christ. That does not take away from my belief that God, the ultimate being, cosmic mind, is still there, okay? But what a lot of people are referring to as God, in particular in the Old Testament, and they're attributing all these things to God, in particular all these heinous things that happened, that's not God. That is a being that's calling himself God, just as the head of the Draco calls himself the king of the world. I could call myself Emperor of the Galaxy and crown myself Tarzan, King of Mars, to quote a monster magnet, but that doesn't make it true. That's just what these beings are doing. And just like the people that conquered in the pre-Columbian civilizations that were there, the Spaniards took it over and they turned them into workers and subjugated them. that doesn't mean that they are, you know, the true overlords of the world. They're just in charge of that part of the world temporarily because they conquered it. Well, when anybody colonizes something, you eventually want to not have to be so hands-on to where the people govern themselves. That's how colonization works.
I call them the hybrid plantation managers.
Yeah, plantation man, and what they do is they wanted to create avatars, kind of mini versions of themselves, and then take them over and say, look, you guys can now run your own selves. When you look at a lot of these laws and rules from the Jewish and Muslim traditions, not taken away from anything from those cultures, but when you look at, like, not to eat pork is like against God, not to eat shellfish is against God. I don't believe that at all, because those are rules and laws that were good for that time. At that time, trichinosis was probably a big problem, because if you undercook pork, you might get really sick. So it's a nasty thing to eat. You probably shouldn't eat it. But then again, cows are not necessarily clean animals either. And I argued with one of my Muslim friends recently, and I said, I was raised around cows.
Any farmer wouldn't.
Pigs will not eat their own poop, but cows will. Cows will eat grass from their own poop. They will actually eat their own poop. And they're like, pig is a filthy animal. Pig is a filthy animal. Yeah, it is. But a cow is too. And then, you know, to get into the whole shrimp thing, whatever, you could easily, I've been sick. I've been food poisoned by eating bad shrimp. So it was more of a man's law thing than to say, you know, what do you call it? Like God's law. Like, this isn't God telling you to do these things. If this higher being told you that, he's telling you for your own physical good. It's not a spiritual thing at all. And in this day and age, trichinosis hasn't been a really big problem since 1967. I mean, we've had it, but it's not been a huge outbreak of it since 1967. So, I mean, when you go back and you look at, like, these rules and laws and all these other things, these are outdated. They were obviously put together by men, not real. And so I tell them, I said, dude, you know, you guys are following rules and laws that were created by a priesthood class who may have been the privileged few to actually talk to our overlords. And they were like, hey, only we can talk to these gods. And eventually maybe these gods weren't even there anymore. They were gone. And it was just the priest saying, yeah, we're still over here. He's just invisible. We're talking to him, though. He's behind this curtain. Don't come in here. And it was like, you know, Wizard of Oz. But anyway, to get off my soapbox, but the point is that, you know, these beings, they created all this drama. And, you know, their constant incursions into our lives and intrusions into our lives, it continues up to this day. So, yeah, go on, James.
Yeah, the proof for the reptilian overlordship is abundant. If there's a guest you can get on, Pierre Sabak, I've had him on my show. He's written 2 great books on the subject. They're very dense. They're very, like, scholarly and academic. But, man, he cites everything in the original Aramaic, Hebrew, the Greek, the Latin, and he just goes down the list. All the terms that were used to describe these heavenly type beings that were being reported by, you know, the chroniclers and the sages back in the day, they all translated back, when you cut to the chase, to serpents, snakes, lizards, reptilian type beings, time after time after time. There's this notion that, oh, you know, it's really the little grays that, you know, all these chroniclers in ancient times and all these writers in these various holy texts have written about, they're exclusively the grays. No, I beg to differ. The grays, or some of the factions of the grays, have done a lot of the heavy lifting for the reptilians, because some of these gray factions are essentially cosmic vassals. So, you know, they get their little piece of the pie, but in return, very mafia-like. Yes, very logical, very mafia-like. They have to do the bidding of the reptilians, and a lot of that involves abductions, medical procedures, genetic engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So you can look at it from the scholarly aspect, where Pierre Sabak makes the case, just and that alone, that all these references to all these different beings, the Watchers, this, that, and the other, you trace it back in its original. They were talking about specifically not gray-looking beings, but serpent beings, reptilian beings. And also, he pointed out a lot of the terms used to describe celestial objects or flying objects within the atmosphere. You track it back, there was always an etymological connection between the craft, which were always regarded as being otherworldly and not piloted by humans, and also these reptilians. So there was a correlation between the craft that were being seen, that we would call craft now, and also the beings that piloted or controlled them, if you track it back. And also from the standpoint of, if you look back at our occulted history, occulted from the standpoint of hidden, right? This is why there's just this big kerfuffle amongst the lamestream archaeologists about Graham Hancock. Now, Graham Hancock is just pointing out
lamestream?
Lamestream, definitely. Because Graham Hancock is absolutely right. This solar system is subject to cyclic, periodic, celestially driven cataclysms. I mean, not only naturally celestially occurring, but that doesn't even include all the wars that have gone on. We got an asteroid belt. There used to be a huge planet in the solar system that was blown apart in a war.
Yeah, that's what that is now. There's an asteroid belt there.
There's an asteroid belt where there should be another planet there. Like on Mars, you have this gouge in the ground, which makes the Grand Canyon look like a little stream, right?
Yeah.
And then also the gigantic mega monuments. That's a whole other story. But the point being is that this solar system and this planet in particular has been subjected to these celestially driven cataclysms. The last time this happened was 9,000 to 12,000 years ago, which in geologic terms is less than a blink of an eye, right? And here we are 9,000 to 12,000 years later, and I really believe that these reptilian overlords, and they're working through their hybrid plantation managers. This is why they're normalizing all this heinous stuff, and the laws you talked about earlier. One type of law is a Noahide law, which is practiced in put by the Judaic tradition and the Arabic tradition, but it's very harsh. It's really no different than the Hammurabi Code, right? It's like extremely harsh laws, and that's what they're bringing back, and they're calling it wokeism and different names for it, but it's all the same, right?
And so, Code of Deuteronomy was used forever by a lot of Christian empires. They adopted that from the Judaic tradition, and they used it to do all kinds of things. And Islam came and just kind of followed in the same footsteps. And so anyway, go on.
Well, yeah, but a fundamental aspect to Islam is a belief in the jinn, and how the jinn can, cause havoc and hold sway in the lives of people and societies, right? So even in their lore, in Islamic lore, the jinn are taken for granted. They're just there. We know they're there, and if you're not careful, they'll manipulate your whole society, right? So you have the jinn there. You talked about the Spanish conquistadors, and people don't realize these guys, Cortez, De Soto, I mean, they just went on mass slaughter sprees, right? They just went on mass military, ethnic cleansing, eradication. And there's a spiritual dynamic to that. When people are going around just randomly killing people, there's going to be entities of all sorts. It wasn't random. It was very systematic, because they looted the real world. It was pinpointed. So much of the history that would have just enlightened us in so many fields, archaeology, if nothing else, that was looted from South America, Latin America, that, it's either wound up in the bottom of the ocean in a galley, or it was secreted beneath the Vatican or something. And they'll never see the light of day unless we turn this whole thing around. And they get all the gold, you see, and that backfired on the Spanish later. But in some ways, a whole other story. But point being is that those wars of colonization, that was this non-human intelligence spreading its tentacles throughout the planet. And I often liken it to the classic war between the Athenian Empire and the Spartan Alliance, right? You have these two warring policies, and then they have their own colonists, and they send them all out throughout Greece and the Near East, and then by hook and crook, those colonists start warring amongst themselves, and pretty soon the parent colonizing kind of city states are pulled into it, and you see that's pretty much how it works. It's like cosmic vassalage on a galactic scale or higher, and so and we play a role in that too, because if we allow this process to continue, and then because these entities are pushing up against the celestially driven timetable I was talking about, we're right on the cusp of all this stuff happening again. Whether they were doing all this geoengineering or not, it's going to happen. So they want to lay everything in, and just to backtrack, The last time this happened, these celestially driven cataclysms, of course, pretty much most of humanity was wiped out. What happened, it gave the opportunity for these genetic engineering type beings to say, okay, we got a smaller population base to work with. Let's start hybridizing the hell out of them. We'll create our own astronomer priesthood, hybridized, right? We'll wipe out symbol language learning. We'll teach them alphabet letter learning, and then thereby gain control of the left side of their brains, fill it with all these dogmas where they wind up killing each other, right? And then we'll just totally shut down the natural intuitive side. We'll just wipe out all the shamans and all the medicine men and women, and in the form of the teacher stewards.
That is the Kali Yuga. It says in the end,
Yes,
when Krishna
yes.
Kalik returns, that spirituality will be down to like 10%, and
Oh,
that
yeah,
they will only be hiding up in the high places, away from the eyes of what is left of mankind. And when it talks at the end of the Kali Yuga and the Vedas about how we're stunted as small, pathetic versions of what we once were in the Satra and
Yes.
Tetra Yugas, that's because in the Satra and Tetra Yugas we were 30 feet tall. And now
Yes.
we're already these small little people think that we're going to get smaller and more stunted. No, this is it. We're already puny and pathetic. We can get a little bit smaller because that's what's going to happen because of the lack of nourishment and things like that.
Yes.
One of the things I was going to interject with you, James, is the Popol Vuh.
Yes.
You were
Yes.
talking about lost information. Now, the Mayans had an ancient text called the Popol Vuh. The guy that found it was a friar. His name was his last name started with an X, but I think it was silent. It was Imanes or something like that. I don't remember his first name. But the Popol Vuh actually talks about the history of the ancient mankind, and it gives a detailed record of what, who, and where, and what the progenitors of the Mayan people were, who they believed they were, and they were interstellar, extraterrestrial people that basically walked through a stargate. And when you look at the pictures of the Mayan reliefs, there are pictures on there that look like a guy with an astronaut, like he's got a helmet on. I mean, he's like piloting a ship. It's just laid out there like in stone, And so when you look at these, and there was a friar, as I said, like a Dominican friar who preserved the Popol Vuh, and he hid it. Now, I'm going to say this. The Aztecs were a very, very bad people. I'm sorry, I don't really agree with their...
Yes.
People are like, they were destroyed, whatever. That's the one good thing the Spaniards did, because they were genociding their neighbors. The Aztecs had literally enslaved and controlled and genocided their neighbors, and they were doing it in the name of
Human sacrifice.
to a god named Huitzilopochtli. When you look at him, he looks very reptilian. And thank you for that donation, Juan Arturo Mata, who's actually been on the show with a really cool story. You got to check that out, guys, on the regular podcast. Thank you for the donation. But when you look at what these beings who they were serving, like Quetzalcoatl, he was known as the feathered serpent.
Yes.
I mean, it goes back to all of this serpent this and dragon that and all this other stuff. Kukulkan is also he's reminiscent of Quetzalcoatl, who would have been a predecessor to him from the Mayan culture. And when you look at the Aztecs, though, they were so brutal and so homicidal, and they had enslaved their neighbors. They were taught that. One of the things that the Mayan people, that they called themselves the Quiche, okay, the Quiche people, okay, and that's where the Popol Vuh came from. It was from a people that was even before them. And when you look at the Aztecs, they had two cities, Tenochtitlan, and another one on Lake Texcoco. It was Teotihuacan. They avoided that one because it was, they said, built by giants that were gods. A race of giants had built that one, and they had wiped out the previous civilization that had been there, who had wiped out the previous civilization that had been there before them, and so on and so forth. So when you look at the genocide going on, it was like it's perpetual. And I believe that these ancient aliens, ancient whatever they were, deities, whatever they want to set themselves up as, had every bit to do with that, because whenever humans would get out of line, they would say, okay, time for a war, and let's pit them against each other, and let's make them fight, and by proxy, because that thins the herd, and then it has a dual purpose. Then we decide who wins. We don't have to go full tilt on and destroy the land, because they're already fighting in the sky. They're already blowing the heck out of each other up. What was happening, like in the Vedas and the Hindus, they were zapping each other. They were knocking each other out of the sky, and mankind was fighting below as a proxy. I mean, there was war upon war, and then when you look at like the story of Troy, which we know is real because Heinrich Schliemann found it, an archaeologist who was dedicated. They said no, it was just made up. You know, Homer just wrote that. He didn't know what he was talking about. It was just a made up thing. You know, like they disregard Plato all the time. Say, oh, he was just talking about Atlantis. It wasn't real. It never really happened. That's bullcrap. That is all real. And what happened was there were actual gods and demigods that fought on both sides of that war, because when you read the Iliad, it reads just like the Shaver mystery, like it's some sort of novel, like some sort of novelization that's not really a true story, but it is a true story. It is a real story. This stuff really happened. There was a killing. I mean,
just to interject for a second,
go ahead.
We see in these conflicts between the Anunnaki and in other epics, ancient texts, that it was often within the family, brother against brother, cousin against cousin, for supremacy. And we see that played out on Earth throughout our history, where, you know, one brother would have his set of things and he'd lead it against his younger brother who just, you know, he wants to just get rid of him, right? And so brother against brother, cousin against cousin, it's all about bloodline, preserving the bloodline. And one thing that people have to take into account, and it's kind of unpleasant, but after these celestially driven cataclysms the last time around, in order for some of these societies, these, by then it would have been like more like clans or groupings of survivors on the surface, some of them would have had to resort to cannibalism. So within the morphogenetic field that Rupert Sheldrake talks about, and within the DNA, the ancestral DNA, you know, inherited, you know, down through the centuries to our age, right? There is that, for lack of a better term, receptor within people. It's more pronounced in some hybridized bloodlines than the general public, right? And there's a reason for that, okay? And so with the blood and with these receptors and with that hybridization comes magical know-how, magical understanding, all of these, the ability to impose their will upon matter, and, you know, at a quantum level. All that stuff was rubbished by the controlled scientific community. But at the deepest, darkest levels, the aforementioned Edward Bulwer Lytton was a Rosicrucian and a mystic. So, you know, not only did he probably hear the story, maybe it happened to him being stuck in the ground and seeing all that stuff, but in his circles, they would have taken this stuff for granted. And that's what people have to understand. Now, in this recent document that's come out, I haven't read it myself, but recently released, in some of the verbiage in these officially released documents, they pretty much admit that these aliens, for lack of a better term, are walking amongst us. And if you look again at the lore throughout the world, that's what they always said, that these beings can take on any shape, form. For example, reptilians can appear as Nordics, they can appear as tall grays, they can appear as military, they can appear as anything they want. They have some of them, not all of them, but some of them have that means. So we have to understand that humanity was directed since this last series of cataclysms. And one great book, and I want to hear your thoughts on all this, William Bramley's book, The Gods of Eden. If people can read that book, Barbie Bartholomew called that book the Bible. Okay, and once again, the cult of the dragon, the brotherhood of the serpent, it's all in there. William Bramley's book, The Gods of Eden.
In your research, where did you cross over? I'm curious, James, because like I know kind of where I was at, and I just kind of fell off off the precipice of, you know, I was like, I'm at the height of my knowledge, I know, and then I'm like looking and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really dumb. And I kind of came to the conclusion that academia in itself is stunted and really silly. And I like what you said, the lamestream media. When you look at the scientists and the people that are aligned against Graham Hancock, Graham Hancock's not even really that radical.
No,
by our standards.
I think he knows more. I think he knows more. I think he knows more, and I understand totally. If he knew more, why he would hold back. I understand totally, and I don't hold it against him. He's just doing what he's doing a great job.
Yeah, and of course, if anybody wants to see, if you want to read about these people. One of them that we just talked about, Graham Hancock. He's got a show on Netflix. I don't know how long it's going to be on there. They're trying to denounce it as fiction. Folks, it's not fiction. Okay, Anthony, you've watched the whole series. I've only watched 2 episodes of it.
Yeah, it's called Ancient Apocalypse on
Ancient
Netflix.
Apocalypse. It's, and
That's it.
and then of course what you're talking about, the guy that you're talking about here, I just looked him up too to make sure that I got it correct. Edward Bulwer Lytton. Lytton is
Yes.
Lytton. I wanted to make sure I spelled his name correctly. Yeah. And what you're talking about is his as a Rosicrucian and believing in the inner earth. I mean, it was taken as fact. And I believe he was a Freemason, actually. Wasn't he a Freemason?
Yeah, I think probably. The book was called The Coming Race, and the whole thesis of the book was at some point in the future, this race is going to come out from the underground and take over the surface, what they've been plotting all along. Interesting subject.
Which they also told when Admiral Byrd went to the inner earth, and
Yes.
saw what he saw, the mammoth and all that. He said that they told him the same thing, that eventually they're going to come out and they're going to set things correct or whatever. And like I've said before, the kingdom of God is found within, literally, not without. And I stand by that. And I tell people, a lot of people do a lot of things to try to get to where they want to be. Like, they want to take shortcuts. But folks, the only way to get to the truth and the bottom of things is to do research, to spend, like I've spent many waking hours. My wife says I was always reading. I was always in a book. I've read so much. But and she's always like, but now I'm spending the bulk of my time only focusing on the research for the show and talking to guests, people like you. And of course, we, like you said, you had talked to Linda Godfrey. Linda, her opinion on the reptilians, I'll tell you point blank, she was terrified of them. She didn't want to touch this subject. It's something that she did not go into it. She would do the Dogman and the Bigfoot, but not the reptilians.
And there's something in the psyche of many humans today, and going back countless millennia, that they just recoil at the very subject.
Mm-hmm. And it is, because it can be unnerving. To some, it's like it's comical, and to others, it's like it's scary. But hold on one second. That color is really, I don't know what that is, what you just did. But to some, it's very unnerving and it's frightening. And whenever I've talked to people about this, there are some people who I've had like a friend of mine's neighbor. We were talking one time, and the next day he's like, "Dude, I had a nightmare about what you had talked about or whatever." And I was like, that was my intention, was to scare the crap out of you. Do you feel like being a good person? And I'm just kidding. I didn't do that. But he did get scared. He was, and the idea of it, he didn't want to talk about it. And he was telling me about these dreams he was having, which I think were abduction scenarios. And it scared him so bad that he couldn't go to sleep at night without the aid of like medication or whatever. But I feel like all I did was just open up his mind. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like I exposed him to the truth, and he was hard-pressed to handle it because he didn't want to believe. He wanted to believe these were dreams, that he was having night terrors. And I was like, I don't think that's what this is. I think that you were experiencing abduction scenarios. And going back to what you said about the Greys, now, the Greys to me are mercenary, biological robots, whatever you want to call it. They aren't the main, even though they're the ones that are seen the most, they aren't the main player. And what you were trying to convey to the audience, which is I'm sure is what you were trying to explain, was that they're being manipulated and controlled by another higher race, and i.e. the Reptilians. A lot of people have no idea what that is or why that is. They just know that they've dealt with the quote-unquote Greys, and they don't know who they are, what they are, or what their agenda is. But like, there are so many abduction scenarios that I've been told and given, and Tony, we've covered multiple ones on the show.
I was actually going to mention, what comes to mind is that that woman who explained to us that she kept getting abducted over and over again, and she kept explaining the different races that she visited, or that visited her during that. And one of them was a reptilian race. Another one was like an insect race, I believe.
The mantis people. Yeah.
Mantis people.
Mantis,
Other than-
a mantis being. She didn't call them people.
Yeah. Then I remember specifically, she said, or what you told me about the Nordic race, or like these tall, like hyperhumans, basically. Just and that's why it's so weird. And I remember you saying all this way back about these grays actually just being like the dogs, basically, where like they just send you out. Like they're just like to go fetch and do whatever I say, kind of.
Well, the lady that I worked with Scorpion, when he went and opened his big mouth and told her I'd seen a werewolf, and I was supposed to be the head of security at this computer company, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he just told this lady, you know, who worked for another company that was doing, they were only doing work for 2 particular floors for the construction. But she was at the head of that company, and he told her that, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I'm making $17 an hour in 2000. In 2000, $17 an hour was a lot of money. I mean, that's nothing now. But at that time, though, that's a pretty good job. You know, you'd like to keep it. So I was very annoyed with him, and I'm like, why would you tell this woman? You know, but thank God she had been abducted. Well, not thank God she had been abducted. That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant, James. Okay, in the audience, I'm not happy that this woman was abducted by these beings. I'm saying for my sake, it worked out because she, in turn, had a story, and she tried to convince me night after night that the Dogman that I had seen when I was 15 was an avatar of one of these alien type beings. I had no idea back then what I thought or what it was. I didn't know. But I said, look, you know, I had to try to make friends with her, but she started out getting abducted by the Greys, and it graduated into an encounter in the Poconos with reptilians.
That's often how it happens. If one were to strip away the screen memories imposed upon the abductee, and then people don't realize this, but there's a second layer of screens designed for the regressionist or the hypnotherapist, abduction researcher. And my mentor, Barbara Bartholomew, was able to get past both levels, right? And there are some people like this lady you were referring to, and I've known some of them. They seem to retain, for whatever reason, an awful lot of, a large amount of conscious awareness and retain a lot of memories. Because I'm one of those types where they can just send me back and I wouldn't remember a bloody thing, right? Where some people, they seem to retain different neurology. I don't know. They seem to retain more memories and more awareness. And what they describe is, yes, some of the abductions seem to only involve the Greys, but there are times when the Greys bring me somewhere, and then they bring me within the confines of this base or underground lair or whatever, some other place, and they see more entities there. They bring me to another place, and they see more entities. Some people are literally brought before what my mentor called assemblies, where it's a scene reminiscent of Star Wars, where like you have that Parliament session with all these different ETs and in rows like a gallery, and then they present like humans. You know, look at this abductee child, right? They do stuff like that, and there's like whole different races of species of ETs, you know, looking on. So it's not unusual what they've done, and I'm not, you know, casting blame, aspersions. I'm looking at it from, you know, a standpoint of a historian here. What some of these more mainstream alien abduction researchers did was they made the focus strictly on the Greys. And because there were such big names in the field, they effectively, I do believe, squelched a lot of alien abduction research into reptilians, because I'd spoken to people who were regressed and worked with these big name abduction research. I told them about the reptilians, they didn't want to hear it. And I'm talking about some of the biggest names in alien abduction research, right? So that's just something, I don't hold it against them. I'm not going to call them controlled opposition. That's such a term that's bandied about so often these days. It's like, look, I'm going to take what I can from their research and just leave the rest on the shelf. I'm not going to get emotionally overwrought about it, right? If they just won't go there, that's fine. I won't make a value judgment. But it told me a lot that not only were they suppressing, essentially, accounts, first-person accounts of reptilians, but also the deep black military involvement too. And then there was spin on that. Oh, these aren't really aliens abducting people. This is all just military mind control. That's nonsense. That's like putting the cart before the horse, right? So, you know, just to set the record straight there.
Well, and it happens in the Bigfoot field too. You got certain people that I believe are leading if people and the leading members of the field, and as they go, the Bigfoot community goes, and it's
Yes.
not they're just leading everybody down this one path. And some of my close colleagues, I feel like they feel the need to toe the line because they want to say, hey, this is what this could be, but if they even look in that direction, they have these principalities that come down on them and go like, no, you better stay in line with this. It's a big ape.
Yes.
You know, it's Gigantopithecus,
Yes, that's right.
you know. And so they kind of police you. And I was
Yes.
in danger of that in my early days. And I was kind of bullied and pushed around a little bit in my early days when I was doing my Dogman research by being told, no, you do this, you do that. You talk about them this way. You don't say this part of it. You leave that out. And so I did. And now I'm having to go back, which I hope that my book, when it comes out, is going to clear up some of that because there are a lot of aspects to these stories that were left behind. And
Yes.
I have a really good friend, you know, that's helping me with this, and we're trying to decipher it and get back into the old stories. I'm going into my old archives and I'm digging them
That's
out,
right.
and I'm like redoing those stories in their entirety because it leaves out a lot of aliens, not aliens, UFO encounters, people seeing UFOs, people seeing ghosts, all in the same area with in the
Yes.
same vicinity of these creatures. And so we're being done a disservice, you know, by these people who aren't looking at this in one long Fortean, Fortean, Fortean. They're not looking at it all as one big category. They're just looking at it in compartmentalized little segments, and you're not getting the whole story that way. When someone
Yes,
tells me
and-
that you see what I'm
Well,
saying?
well,
Like it's the
They're
same.
being
I see what
very
you're saying
selective
because
about the information.
what they did was, but even the term Fortean was twisted around because the way Charles Fort intended it, he said straight up, we're somebody's property, right? So he was under no illusions to the nature of this reality. And then now Fortean, the way you describe it, and what I've encountered too, is they want to keep it really academic, believable. Say, well, who are we trying to impress? Who are we trying? I'm not getting any grants from anybody, right? And no one's going to give me money to do this. I'll fund your research. I don't want your money to fund my research, right? Because I don't want to be led astray. I want to be a free agent. And like, for example, we're talking about the different guises of reptilians. If people go back into their case histories, how many times did they encounter a tall being with a dark cloak, hooded, robed, right? Gave off a very reptilian vibe, seemed like a reptilian, but you couldn't really see their face or their body. But you saw behind the cloak, big mass, big chest, big musculature, big muscles. Okay, could have been a rep, but a lot of people just think, I don't know, we're just a being with a hood and a big cloak. I don't know what it was. But if you look at their record and their personal history, and they've had reptilian encounters before, well, it possibly exists. That hooded being was a reptilian. Same thing with the Dogman research. Oh, back then they were told that's just a Bigfoot. That's not a Dogman or some wolf-looking thing. That's just you just misidentified it.
About my encounter.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, and whenever you look at these, to touch on what you had said about, you don't want somebody to fund your research, you get locked into these like, well, I'm paying you, so you have to go in this direction.
That's right.
And
Yeah, I
like
think
I
that
was
happened.
offered a sponsorship, and you guys know about this. This is just an example. Like I won't do it because they gave me this beard oil, so I put it on my beard, and it made my beard crispy.
No.
And Tony, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And we were like, we're not gonna promote this. This thing has made my beard crunchy and weird. And if I go to kiss my wife, it gives her a cut. Okay, so how am I gonna sit there and go, hey, use this particular beard oil because it makes my beard? No, it doesn't, because you're lying, and I'm not gonna do that. So I've turned down sponsorships that I could have made money on because I don't believe in the product. And what I did in the early days was kind of, I didn't deny what I knew, but I was going against by not telling the whole story because I wasn't allowed to. And that was a big, and even when I started my own show, I was still being told, hey, you're getting out of line. Dogman is a completely physical creature and blah, blah, blah. It has nothing to do with this other stuff. Reptilians have nothing to do with Dogman. And
It's the limitations. Just, I'm not making a value judgment on them, but there's a lot of people that have limitations as far as the perception and the perceptual awareness. Now, we were talking about these mystic occultic orders, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, etc. They know that there's more than just physical matter. especially at the deepest, darkest levels. These people are warlocks. They're not just magicians or adepts. They're full-on warlocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so by trying to impose our misunderstanding and our misperception of reality, we say, well, I've never seen it, I don't believe it, I don't understand it, and somehow that compels reality to conform to that level of understanding. No, that's completely backwards. It's not how it works. There are many people I've met, Josh, who told me extraordinary things they witnessed right in front of them. And then I'd ask them after they tell the story, well, what do you think about that? I don't know. I didn't know what it was. I don't even believe in UFOs. Well, he just told me about a UFO sighting at close range, which was spectacular by any standards. And you yourself are skeptical about them. You see, so there's this seemingly self-censoring aspect going on. Some of my good buddies when I lived in San Jose, California, these guys are my homies. Partied with them countless times, right? And one party spot was Calaveras Mountain, which is a big-time electromagnetic anomaly area, a lot of UFO sightings there, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they went up there just to party one night, and then coming back, they were in two cars. One of them was a pickup truck with a bunch of guys and gals, in the pickup truck, and they were convoying down the road, down the hill, off Calaveras Mountain. Well, a flying saucer, this is at night, emitting a bright blue light, buzzed both of them, terrorized the hell out of them all the way down till they got back to, Milpitas, right next to San Jose. And the funny thing about it was, when I overheard them making jokes about little green men and laughing about UFOs, I decided to ask them about that. Now, what are you talking about? After making me swear up and down, I wouldn't laugh at them and wouldn't tell anybody about it. 3 or 4 of my friends related the story I just told to you, where they were coming down the hill in 2 cars. One of them was a pickup, and the guys in the pickup said that UFO, you could have almost reached out and you could have touched it. And it understandably, it terrified them. But the after effect, they're making jokes about themselves, amongst themselves, almost like, okay, we have this little inner secret amongst us, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, but we're not going to tell anyone else because of the ridicule factor. And now what they're doing, for some time I've been saying, they're going to create a new ex-military or intelligence-related priesthood to regulate UFOs. Now they're changing the definitions into UAPs and whatnot, right? So, and what they're doing, not surprisingly, they're neatly sidestepping everything we've talked about. The underground bases, the Native Americans talking about underground bases where these beings, the Native Americans, some of them, the Hopi in particular, but others, they refer to the Greys as the ant people because it seemed to them they're always digging tunnel systems and coming in and out of the ground, right? That makes perfect sense from a cosmological standpoint. And then, really quickly again, Lakotas say they originated from the Sirius system. Throughout the desert Southwest, they have this obsession with the Orion constellation, and some of the desert Southwest tribes claim to have originated in the Orion system. So that's like that around the world. The Aborigines in Australia say they're from the Pleiades. So it's only recently that we've had this notion that, oh no, humans, we only ever been here. We've never been anywhere else. That's nonsense. If you look at the lore, it's like we were all brought here.
Yeah, and to touch on the Lakota, you're talking about the Sioux, which the word Sioux actually means feces, and that's a derogatory term given to the
that's a French came up. Yeah.
Well, actually, the Pawnee were the originals that called and it was
They
actually
hated them
because
so much,
the arrows, they dipped their arrows in poop.
Fecal,
Yeah, and then they would shoot you, and if you got shot with them back then, you were going to die. It's sepsis.
It's like an early version of a Vietnam era punji stick,
Yeah,
that's what I was just thinking.
Yeah, and so the Lakota, though, they believe that they sprang up from the earth. There's a lot of those different stories where they just came from the earth, and it was always from the earth.
Sipapuni. But that's a lot of times where they claim, when they know the selection, when the cataclysms are coming, they know a lot of these tribes to go underground. The Hopi Sipapuni it's a classic example of that. It's like, okay, we're going to have a cataclysm, be it fire, water, whatever, we're going underground, right? And some of the stories of some of these Native American tribes, they walk miles underground to get to a sanctuary. It wasn't just like, okay, we just go underground. No, that they went on like a Lord of the Rings type journey underground to get to a sanctuary, right? Because they had to surface somewhere and still survive, right?
I did a dive on the Reptilian Dogman connection We did a few stories that we had a guy who worked for a large, I almost said the name, large computer company who came on our show and said that he was in an elevator with a guy. And Tony, you and Anthony, I know you guys remember this. You know him very well. He's a friend of mine from Chicago from back in the old days. And he just laid it out there. He said the guy's face changed into a reptilian, like a lizard.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And around that same time that was going on, there was sightings of what we believe to be dogmen / werewolf-looking creatures that were running around. And Anthony, you and my brother and Nellie, we were involved in that investigation. And we actually went to their campus, and we went and we explored it. And there was a lot of wooded area out there. It was at the height of the pandemic, and a friend of a listener, he's probably in the chat right now. He's a listener of the show, and he was also the head of security at that time. And he took us there, and he said, look, people are seeing these werewolf-looking things in the woods. And then we live next door to a large computer company. My apartment, actually, I still have an apartment that's there. I don't live there, but I have the place. But it's right next to this computer company. And me and my brother, we actually made friends with some guys from India that were our neighbors that lived upstairs and across the hall from us. And they were telling us crazy stories about this whitish, hairy, werewolf-looking creature that one of the workers had seen. And at the same time, one of the workers had seen some sort of cloaked figure with a lizard-type face. And they coincided. And so me and my brother, we started kicking the idea around. And Anthony, I know you were there at that time too, and so was Pete, and he's been on the show. Pete's probably listening too. He's a friend of mine, lives up in Colorado. We've been down the rabbit hole with all of this. And we came to the conclusion together that it was like the dogmen are there to protect them. I mean, I really believe that they were probably created by some sort of higher intelligence and given some sort of abilities. They're a metaphysical manifestation, but it's only because we don't understand the fourth density or the fifth density. These things show up, and they are like protectors of these beings.
Yeah, they're like a Praetorian guard, because in a lot of the lore.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, that's
because they guard Indian mounds. They guard Indian mounds.
Mm-hmm.
See, I think what happens in that place you're describing, high likelihood, okay, educated guess, not only are there inner Earth entrances, but probably there's a high electromagnetic anomaly vortex thing going on too, right? Because we know, and this is what a lot of the mainstream, more cryptozoologists, so-called, don't want to hear, is that these beings seem to have this metaphysical, not all of them, but some of them seem to have this metaphysical capability. Now, some of the Native American elders, they say, oh yeah, some of them are completely interdimensional. They know where the interdimensional portals and doorways are, and they come and go. Oh, let's go hunt on Earth. Then they come and they bag a few deer. Then they go back, right? And this is why it baffles, exactly, and it baffles the more mainstream researchers, because they say, oh, well, the footprints, they just disappeared. They're scratching their heads, right? Well, there's a reason for that, and that's what you're touching on here. And in that kind of high anomaly zone, you will see shapeshifting. You will see, there will be ghostly phenomena. What was happening to me in my teenage years, I was having so much what I thought was ghostly phenomena that I thought that my bedroom in particular in the house was haunted, okay? Even my dog, my German Shepherd, knew that there was some kind of spectral visitor that would show up every once in a while. But the point being is that, just like Calaveras Mountain, it was a high electromagnetic anomaly zone where these things tend to happen.
Yeah. When have you done a dive on Dolce? Have you ever done a dive on that?
Yes, I've spoken. My mentor had regressed people that were taken there beneath underground. I've spoken to William English, and I'm going to have that podcast out at some point. And he'd spoken, and there's a lot of, once again, this comes around cyclically, but there are people out there that want to be players in our field that are talking trash about the late Paul Benowitz, who was psyoped and murdered because he was tracking the activity not out of Dolce, but out of Archuleta Mesa and nearby Sandia National Labs, that area, right, which is another high anomaly.
No, that's a conspiracy theory there, you're saying.
That's right. Native Americans also talked about all of the alien type ant people activity there. Point being is that when it comes to Dolce, I knew people who personally knew Thomas Costello. He was a real person. He was a RAND security specialist, audiovisual guy. He escaped. He took some evidence with him. They kidnapped his family, brought him underground for biological experiments, probably. And he escaped. And he'd been on the run for a while. Bill Hamilton told me, and others, he was one of the great old school researchers back in the day. He told me that Thomas Costello had this signal that he would give to people every 6 months. There was a means by which he would let people know he was still alive, but he was always on the run. And after a while, they didn't get that message, that signal anymore. They just assumed that he either died of natural causes or something else happened. Point being is that the Dolce story, it predates all of that. That once again, the Native Americans and Paul Benowitz and Gabe Valdez, who was, memory serves, he was a Native American reservation police officer. Before they made him an offer he couldn't refuse, I think he's passed away, I can say this now. Before he passed away, he was made some kind of offer he couldn't refuse, and then he did a 180 and started, making dismissive comments about the whole Dolce story. But prior to that, he was telling investigators that, yes, that the Apaches here at the Jicarilla Reservation, they've been saying for centuries that these beings are coming out of this mountain, and they're, not only taking like women and children, but they have something to do with all the cattle that's turning up missing and mutilated and stuff, right? So because that was going on in that area too, the cattle mutilation phenomena. So anyway, yeah, what did you want to say about Dolce? I believe Dolce is real.
Yeah.
Well,
you said a mouthful. I mean, but
in a nutshell, yes, it's Dolce. It's real.
Mm-hmm. It's an underground base where
yes.
people have claimed that there was. First of all, there was a fight there that took place between humans and reptilians. I mean, grays. But that was more on the outskirts of it. The inner base itself is said to house multiple creatures.
Yes.
Multiple species, and almost every species, just like there's so many different kinds. Like people have claimed they've seen these gargoyle-looking creatures that they were held there as prisoners, and they had these Dogman, and they had all these chimeras there, and it's basically run by these 9-foot tall, 10-foot tall reptilians, and then a smaller worker reptilians along with humans. And at one point they tried to rebel, and that their rebellion was immediately crushed and destroyed because they wanted to end it and get the people, the beings out of there that were being tormented, tortured, whatever. I can tell you this, that is not an isolated incident. And when you look at, I'm friends with Christopher Garitano. He was on my show, and we talked, and then I was on his show, on his podcast, Off to the Witch. And, when we talked, me and him, about Montauk, because he did a whole show it's on Amazon Prime, the Montauk Chronicles. And then he had a show called Strange World on Discovery Channel, Travel Channel.
I think it was Travel Channel.
History Channel, one of those. I don't know, Travel Channel. I think now the Hallmark Channel has the rights to it or something. But anyway, he has a show, and we talked at length about. He did the Montauk Chronicles, and it's the same story every time. Experimentation taking place, whether the government is involved or not involved, they tend to know about it or be actively involved. And then we're told this isn't happening. We're always told, it's just a bunch of conspiracies. You could march 100 people in front of someone, and they could each tell you the same thing. Yes, this is what happened. Yes, this is what happened. Yes, this is what happened. And they will still be like, I don't believe it. I don't see anything. And they will somehow do mental gymnastics to dance around it, jump around it, and avoid it like it's some sort of hot lava. Like when you're a kid, you play the floor is lava, and you're jumping from pillow to pillow. That's what these people are doing. With absolute knowledge, they're being willfully ignorant. I mean, and academia is the main. I'd say that the smartest people that are supposedly leading us, these so-called scientists and all these academics, are really they're the stupidest people on earth.
Yes,
because,
absolutely.
I mean, it's completely bass backwards, as you said. It's completely, it's not correct. And then you have the people who are trying to come out and tell you the truth, they're being labeled as, you know, and just because the majority believes it doesn't make it true. You know, it is not for everyone to understand or to believe, but people have to be able to come to my show and other people's shows that are, you know, like-minded and listen to your work when you do lectures and understand that this is a real thing. This isn't a joke, okay? Mythology, which is really our history, has been turned into the fiction, and the fiction that they've written and lied about is what's being spat out as the truth. And I, for one, personally, am just like so sick of it's like the more I learn, the more disheartened I get. And, you know, I could punch holes in just about anybody's story with my knowledge of history. I tell people all the time, they'll say something and I'll be like, that's not correct because I know history. Now, get this. What is the number one subject in particular in the West? Okay, and that West being several countries, including Australia. What is the one of the number one subject that kids hate? You know what it is? What is it, Tony? History. You know why? Because it's so boring. They dumb it down. They bore it down to where it's just so bland, and it's like a tasteless bowl of kashi. So if you're sitting there every day having to chew a tasteless bowl of kashi, you're eventually going to be like, I don't like this, okay? I'd rather do math and have, you know, toothpicks poked into my eyes than have to look at this anymore. And so, of course, it's going to be your least liked subject. Of course, because they don't tell it correctly, and it's not true the way that they're telling it.
And those who don't know history are doomed
to repeat it.
Exactly.
And we have been in a cyclical, you know, the wheel of Dharma is what it is. And it just keeps going, and we keep repeating it because we can't get off of it, because we are sent people that are sent here by God, I believe, by the universe, you know, whatever, nature, to tell you, hey, this is what's going on, and it's up to you to be a lemming and fall off the cliff with all your friends because, like, the guys are yucking it up. Oh, we shot some little cream in, you know, or you can be that one that says, I'm going to break away from the herd and I'm going to do the actual woke thing, not the fake woke that they've created, but the awake thing, and go toward the light and be like, this is what is real. This is what is actually happening. And there are groups of people on this earth that have a lot of power and control everything, and they are given that power by the beast, by the dragon, by what you're talking about. I mean, and these people will stick their head in the sand until their head is removed from their body because they are so determined to not believe. And you can look them dead in their eye, and I've told people that I thought some of the smartest people got to be able to understand this. And I will give them sources, and I will give them information. And they're like, yeah, that's just some guy's word, just some guy's opinion. Yeah. You have 1,000 guys' word and opinion, and they still don't listen. They don't want to, you know, they don't get it. They don't want to get it. And it's because they refuse, and they are woefully ignorant about it.
That's where the field investigations come in, because you have to come at it with an open mind. If you come in with like you know, predispositions, biases, what have you, things are going to happen or may potentially happen, which will go right over their heads. And because the knee-jerk response is to be dismissive of it, I'll put it in, you know, in a back burner of my mind, not think about it. And this happens in a lot of these so-called paranormal investigations. They bring along a scientific knucklehead, and he's just there really for, you know, annoyance purposes. But when stuff starts to happen, it conflicts so much with their particular paradigm, and they're mentally rigid. They can't adapt to it. They can't say, okay, I'm experiencing and witnessing things that defy, you know, conventional science and conventional logic. Okay, let's go to town on this. Let's start to figure it out. When you work these field investigations, you work specific locales, specific regions. Like I had Jody Cook talk about the work he and his team had done back in the day in Germantown, right? Because there was this place seemingly swarming with dogmen. Well, that's the place to go. When I lived in San Diego, a lot of the reptilian activity was in the high desert of Southern California. Where did you find me most of the time back in those days? I was in the high desert of Southern California. There was a particular underground base run by the deep black elements of the U.S. Navy that was there in, I'm not going to be specific, I've mentioned it before, but let's just say in the Barstow, Victorville kind of area, right?
I know exactly where that's at in California, Victorville.
Yeah,
There's
and
a highway
there was
right there where a lot of people die too. It's like a really bad highway.
oh yes,
coming out of
yes,
Victorville,
it's all going on there. That's a high density area, very, very active. And so me and my team would go over there, and we befriended a number of the locals who were having reptilian experiences, military experiences. When you're sitting there in their living room at their coffee table, and it's just you and them, and you're speaking experiencer to experiencer, that's when the real nitty gritty, the real intel is laid down. And that's not going to be found. I talked earlier about how mainstream alien abduction research, slanted off in another direction, and leaving people like me on the fringes. You talked about the resistance you were getting from the more mainstream cryptozoologists. It happened to my colleague E.V. Lorgan and I. We were pariahs in Southern California. No one wanted to be, our colleagues or work with us because we were into this reptilian stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And they had a knee-jerk, but what we did was we found others like us. It didn't matter how far we had to drive. We drove. Even on a weekend, just 2 hours or 3 hours in one direction to find people like us that we can talk to. And it gets to the point, as you know, Josh, you don't care what the naysayers say because, they're doing their thing. We're in the trenches. We're nobody special. We just want to get to the bottom of this and ensure that, hey, our ancestors are looking at us, Josh, and say, come on, man, is this all you got? Collectively, to the human race. Is this all you got?
Become a stunted little...
all this, I'm a student of military history, so you're a man of my own heart, after my own heart. So some of these people,
military history for years. I was a magazine, military history. Yeah.
Some of our ancestors had the Hunnic invasions, the Vandals, the Goths. It's like, the Mongols. And it's like, and you guys, right? You dropped the ball, but you know what? I think a critical mass can be reached with far fewer people if we understand in like the classic. Okay, my friend Evie Lorgan, she's what you would call in the old days like a Christian mystic. Okay, she's very much aware of all the different traditions, the Tibetan Buddhism, et cetera, But at core, she's a Jesus-loving spiritual warrior, stand in the gap, shield wall kind of lady. That's why she and I are close colleagues, because she thinks like a spiritual warrior who happens to be an investigator, right? Because she knows how high the stakes are. Not only is DNA the currency of the universe, Josh, but one of the key aspects of research that was going on in Dolce and other places was the human soul, the substance and the ether. And it used to be ether physics, and then it got all distorted, and then all became reductionism and particles and subparticles. But there used to be ether physics was the norm in Germany and in many other places. And the mysticism always was based on what was known as ether physics. And so she takes it like myself from that standpoint. But she's got a very strong Christian faith. And so that's another reason why she was a pariah, because so many people in the New Age field would just automatically reject her if they knew that she was a Christian, right? But she's not exactly the same kind of Christian that other Christians are. She's her own unique type of person, and that's the way we should be. We shouldn't be like everyone else. We should be individuals, each contributing in our own way. That's why this show, you guys, this is so valuable. I mean, I've been a big fan of the Paranormal Roundtable for eons. You guys do top-notch work.
Well, I appreciate that, James, and I've been a fan of your work. And with that being said, James, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on and to talk about all this. And I am just glad that we were able to. And we got to do more work. I'm going to be doing a series with. We got to get together, and I got to do some pre-records with you. I was supposed to get started on it back in this November. And Daniel Jones and me had talked about it with Nick Redfern, and we were going to do a deep dive onto alien abductions. But what happened, Tony? We got sidetracked with work.
Everything. Sidetracked with everything.
Everything. And then we moved, and so it's just been a big,
That's
so
life. Life is a big thing.
And so we're going to get back on track, and I'd like you on board to help us do that deep dive.
I would love to be there because this has been very informative.
Absolutely.
And it's just been me sitting here listening and just learning more and more. It's
and you guys are always welcome on my show too. I'd love to have you on as regular, semi-regular guest. That would be fantastic.
Bring me on whenever you want, man. It's good. It's a pleasure to talk to you and an honor, James. James Bartley, everybody, go check out his work. Where can they find you, James? Tell everybody. TheCosmicSwitchboard.com, and you can find me on Facebook, James Bartley, number 148.
I guess there was 147 James Bartley before that. And then also on Twitter, Cosmic Switch 29. Cosmic Switch 29. That's my Twitter feed.
Mm-hmm. So James Bartley, folks. So I'm gonna bid you adieu. That sounds all like cool. What is that, French? All right. So James, thank you for the information. Thank you for the conversation, and we will be in touch for sure, my friend.
Take it easy. Bye.
You too, man. Bye. So, folks, that was James Bartley. For anybody who didn't know who that was, we were talking to, and James, I've known James for a long time, and we've talked back and forth. And folks, I got a bunch of guests lined up. Like it just goes on and on and on into infinity. Every walk of life, every frame of whatever, every aspect of this paranormal thing, we're gonna flex. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it, man. Paranormal Roundtable. We don't have all these big. We have 21,000 listeners on YouTube. We had a lot more from the 13 platforms, right? But we had to go ahead and say something. You were going to say something, Anthony?
Oh no, I was just gonna agree with you. Yeah, we used to be on all these other different platforms, but they don't let us monetize correctly. So so yeah, we're just right here on YouTube exclusively now. At the very least, for now, until we can figure out a way to get monetized properly.
Yeah, and we do have some sponsors, and sadly enough, we are so behind on everything that we haven't done what they've asked. We're supposed to make a video with one.
Yeah, we have it ready.
We just haven't done it.
We just haven't been able to actually get to it, and I'm actually kind of excited to do it because I looked into it a little bit, and it looked kind of interesting. Some of the stuff I saw in there. I'm not going to give too much away.
Yeah, but we're supposed to do one on the show, and we will eventually. We're just so busy. Let's get to the giveaways. We got to do the giveaways, folks. If you got something, if I owe you something, come at me. Come at me, bro. Okay, is this Spooky Ghost here? You want your butt kicked? What's up, man? Come at me, bro. Come at me. Okay.
You sounded like PC from South Park.
Yeah, bro. Look, hey, if you got a spooky ghost in your house and you need somebody to come and get rid of that sucker, don't call us. That is not what we do. We don't go to your house and kick ghosts' butts. We don't do that. But if you are somebody who likes to listen to the paranormal, wants to hear people talk about it, wants to hear interviews, wants to hear me talk about it, tell stories, people's stories, and then they can come on and tell their stories, that's what we do. That's what we do. That's all we do. Okay, we're not going out there and people say you're not a field. What do you call it? The boots,
boots to the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Yeah, boots on the ground. Whatever. Okay, that's not my job. Okay,
which is just a some kind of tactical way of saying you're going hiking. That's all it is. Well, boots on the ground. You're going for a hike. Right?
Let's not offend some of our friends. Some of our friends like Ken Lyle. Nick Valenti, and the NADP, people like that, they do actually go and do stuff.
No, boots on the ground means that they're going out. But
there's a lot of people that say that,
like if you're not going hiking, then you're not doing real research.
And I've seen people go and literally take pictures of merry-go-rounds and parks around their neighborhood and be like, I'm boots on the ground researching. No, you're not. There are people that actually do that, and they're not them. But I'm going to say this, okay? What we do, we try to bring it to you and break it down in edible chunks that you can understand. Now, this was a lot to take in. Go back and rewatch the show and listen and whatever. I knew it was going to be a good episode because I've listened to James. I've corresponded with James. He's a guy, and if you go back and you watch the episodes that I did with Paul Wallace called Bible Theology, I keep telling Anthony to change the name. He's not changing it. Even at the suggestion of our friend, What Lurks Beneath, because he's got a huge channel and he does it by, putting good titles on there.
I keep forgetting. Sorry.
Well, we got to get it, okay? Because that Bible Theology tells you a lot. It was supposed to be 3 parts. We only got 2 because he was in Australia and I miscalculated the time. But it is really the story of our ancient origins, our civilization, and calling it Bible Theology sounds like a study class. It sounds boring. Nobody wants to watch it. We didn't get a lot of views. But unfortunately, that one and then the ones with Laura Ketchler's where we actually talk about the city of night, those became some of our most popular subjects. But unfortunately, they're like, well, where are the shows at where you talk about it? I talked about them, but they were not labeled good. They were not named good. We did not put good.
They weren't very
The
descriptive.
titles were not good.
Yeah.
Okay, and I completely blame Anthony for that, and myself for giving him the reins to do that horrible damage to my show.
And
If you want
me,
something specific,
I'm
you got to specify.
pretty
Yes.
cool. I didn't do anything wrong. Normally.
Anthony is a gray, after all. He's a biological robot. So
Okay.
He's too long. Right.
no, they have tall ones though. They do. There's really tall ones. There's a tall ones there.
Are they like spindly like him? Like when
Well, just like there's
Y'all
really
are just
fast zombies.
mad because I'm tall, dark, and handsome, and y'all aren't.
I'm 6'4" almost. So I mean,
Okay,
what
well,
are
you're
you
not dark
talking
and
about?
I'm as
handsome.
big as that.
I'm
One
not
out of
dark,
three.
but I'm handsome, folks. My mom always said I'm handsome. Do I look handsome to you? I think I'm handsome. Whoever says that I'm handsome, I get a free something or another. Just saying. Let's take a vote. Who's better looking, me or Anthony? Come on, guys.
Me.
Let's do it. Show your ugly self on the camera. Ugly Anthony over here.
No, the cameras are on y'all.
Nah, exactly. He's so ugly, folks, that he's hiding behind the camera because he doesn't want to expose you to his ugliness. Now, that is actually an act of mercy by him, so kudos to him for
Well,
that.
we kept breaking cameras because they would shatter. What could we do?
Okay, 4 eyes.
When evil...
Okay, you just got LASIK and now you want to be.
You can say that.
So yeah, exactly.
Oh, God. With this guy with the... Man. Tony, we are so abused by this guy. What is... People have no idea.
You know what he did when I cut up his
Y'all
noodle?
are the
He started
ones-
getting those cardboard boxes and just beating me with
He
those.
stopped it. You know what it is?
Well, yeah, because you can be beaten with cardboard boxes.
In
You're
the
that
early
weak.
days, folks, let me tell you something. In the early days of our show, this guy was so horrible to us.
Because y'all sucked. But y'all are better now because I was so mean.
You were over there like, "Hear me?" And he would stop the show.
And you're better off for it.
He would stop. We were doing pre-records. He would stop the show and yell at us and tell
Yeah.
us how terrible we were doing.
It was so.
And Armando was even like scared to come and record with this guy. This guy was so maniacal.
You're gonna give me Vietnam flashbacks. I swear.
Dude.
I don't want to think about
And then
those dark
when
days.
Tony came in as the co-host, he's like, "Man, I
I
don't know
get
if I want to
flashbacks
deal
of
with."
how horrible y'all used to be, but y'all are better
Oh
now.
my gosh,
That's all you're
this
welcome.
guy, you were
We
out
get,
of
like,
control.
Terror
Folks-
flashbacks. You get like meddling in the woods, beating us flashbacks.
Exactly.
It's different.
I can't. And the look he would give you when you were like messing up, he would do that Mike Ditka, you know, the gum chewing, and then the stare, and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is off. He is off his rocker. Like he is mean.
I just
Yeah, it's pretty sad I have to get
You
to
okay,
that point
Tony?
just to
You
get
okay?
y'all to
It just
talking
is
to the
tough.
mic and not
Some
swivel your
tissues
heads
right there.
around and whatever.
Whatever.
But y'all are better at it now. so
Bottom
you're
line
welcome.
is
You're
we're
very
gonna
welcome.
do this, folks. Let's pick some people to win tonight. Let's do this.
Let's do this. Let's get another list of people who haven't won. Let's keep going through that list until we finally.
Somebody said it still says live stream on Tuesday. There again, that's Anthony. He doesn't do things. Somebody said, "Who is handsome?" The door guy at the conference. Bring him on. They're talking about Starscream.
Oh,
Starscream. He's usually in the chat. Where's Starscream at? Starscream. They're talking about you. They're saying that you're handsome. Okay. Chris M. I don't know if you're his type or not, but you know, I think he's married. So you know, I know he's married. But anyway, the thing is, folks, we are doing another conference. It's going to be in September. I'd love for you all to come. Please show up. Come to the conference, dude, and let's talk. Let's introduce you to all these amazing people that I'm friends with, and we can do. It'd be good. It'd be awesome to have you all there. It's more gooder than just sitting at home and looking at us. Anyways, let's do this. I'm gonna let you go first, Tony. Pick somebody from the chat. Who wants a hoodie? Cold as heck. Everybody wants a hoodie. Who wants a hoodie?
I'm trying to see who hasn't won before. Make sure we go through that.
Everybody who's won. Don't just.
Who is this? Gary Lopez?
The Dark Legacy. Gary Lopez. Okay. Illuminati's. Illuminati. I'm going to pick Illuminati. He says I do. Illuminati, have you won before? I like your handle there. DA, do you have one of my products? Did I give you any when you were at the conference? Adam Ware, have you won? I think, Adam, you've won before, I think. Simone Freeman says, I've never won. Sonia Key says, no, I've never won. Anthony picked somebody. I picked Illuminati. Illuminati, you won. You won a PRT hoodie.
I'll choose Ginger B. Or you know what? I said Ginger B. I'm going to stick with it. And
Ginger B, send us your information. Josh Turner at PRTpodcast.com. Josh Turner at PRTpodcast.com. Unless you are a friend of mine on Facebook, then you send me through Messenger.
All right, let's see. Let me
Sign your keys right there. I haven't won.
I think I saw someone here that I've actually met at the conference. Where are they at? Oh, the Hollister. I forgot her last name. Oh yeah,
does it say she hasn't won?
she hasn't won anything.
She said I got a bunch of stuff at the conference.
We can send her something different.
Hollister, what did you get at the conference? Tell us what kind of amazing stuff you got. I'm going to pick another one. I'm going to pick Sonia Keese because she hasn't won, and she's in the chat quite a bit. And so I want her and Illuminati. I'll have two. And Tony, you can pick Ginger B. And Hollister, I hope you come to the next conference. We'll give you more stuff. DA says, I have one of your... DA, get with me about that. I'll send you a hoodie. And your son, too. He's a really good kid. If he wants one, too. We were just talking about him the other day, what a good kid he was.
I want Austin Energy to get the power back on.
Yeah, that's Dorothy. She lives here in Austin. Dorothy, come by, get in touch with me one day and just drop by the studio. We're right here in Austin. We're in 183, and I'll give you whatever you want. Just show up. You and your daughter are fans of the show. Just come by. You don't need to just say, hey, when can I come by? Whatever. Just come by on a Friday night. Come to the studio, literally, on a Friday night, and we'll give it to you. I'm not kidding. We're not worried about, we know you're safe, and if somebody who's not safe shows up, well, Texas is very, a lot of people carry weapons. Not for you, Dorothy. I'm saying in case somebody else shows up, So, Dorothy's a very sweet person. She's not going to come here and try to rob me. But, folks, that's it for tonight. We really enjoyed the show tonight. I was looking forward to it. This is one I had really looked forward to. I look forward to all of them. My apologies to Sibylla again for last week's deal. I should have given her more time on the floor to talk, and I just went off on these tangents or whatever, and so there's that. But Sonia says, I'm doing a dance. Yes. Good. Dance. Here's the thing, folks. We will be here every Friday about 8:30ish, okay? Because we can go later on Fridays. And that was suggested to me by Barton. He kept saying, man, I can't stay up on Tuesdays. I got to go to bed. And so then I decided, you know what? I started talking to a lot of different people that I talked to in the community, and they were like, dude, that's a good idea. I did not do this to pit myself against anyone else's show, contrary to what some people have said. That's not correct. I don't want to go up against other people that everybody's listening to. I want to have my own day, but it is what it is. We got to do it. Thank you for listening. We love you. We'll pray for you. Join the groups, Paranormal Roundtable group on Facebook. We would like to grow that group. It's at 8,400 people. We just hit 21,000. We're already at 21,050 or something like that on YouTube. So we're growing, and we're not growing huge, fast, quick, whatever. We're growing, correctly, organically. I think some of these people who grow really fast, I think what they're doing is they're buying stuff. Honestly, I'm not going to say names, but some of these are just like overnight. They're just blowing up on YouTube here. I'm talking about. You got to wonder, but yeah, that's not me. I'm not doing that. I'm not buying subs. I'm not buying views. Just doing what I do. If people want to come and listen, they can. They keep telling me you should change your format and do it a different way, this, that, and the other. This is how I want to do it because this is all I have time for. This is not my main focus, not my main bread and butter. This isn't how I make a livings, okay? My face, I make my livings, my beautiful face. Just kidding. My face is beat to hell. I got a face for radio, but we decided to show it on camera because why not? If other people can do OnlyFans, we can do only,
Our
whatever.
face, whatever.
Only YouTube. We're doing only YouTube. Okay. So, anyways, folks, remember what I said about the NADP, the IDP. I promote and support 100% the IDP alongside the NADP. Nick Valenti and D.A. Roberts. If anybody threatens them, you automatically aren't my friend. You can just go ahead and see yourself to the door, or you can explain to me why you were stupid enough to do it, and we can go from there. And you don't know the whole story on either side, so I would suggest people stop commenting and talking trash. Okay, knee-jerk reactions don't have no place here. All right, so folks, that's all I got to say. I will be talking with Mr. Valenti and Cook tomorrow to try to broker a peace, and so we can still have our great Dogman researchers out there in the field doing what they do, not in competition. But sometimes people have to go their separate ways. You know what I mean? I figure at some point Tony will break away and do his own show, which will be an absolute failure.
I'm going to only talk about dragons.
See, exactly. There you go. He's already given it away how stupid it's going to be.
No, he's going to go on and on talking about Batman.
Batman.
Dragons and Batman.
And Batman. Yeah, there you go. And dragons. And did I mention Batman? And so, it happens. People go their own separate ways. It doesn't mean that they don't have to be friends, but they don't have to be enemies either. Okay? So let's hope and pray for peace. Everybody try to work together, and maybe we can come up with some answers. Or maybe these things will just remain a mystery. We'll just keep talking about it perpetually. I don't know. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. To all the winners, Sonia Keese, Ginger B, who else?
The Illuminati.
The Illuminati.
And
Hollister.
And Hollister. You guys get with me, and we'll send you something.
That includes the people from last week. That if you haven't gotten your stuff, make sure you send it again.
And if you are a Patreon member, and also DA, you got my personal phone number. We'll talk tomorrow, okay, DA, and then I'll send you. I'll get you out a hoodie or whatever it is you need. Thank you, folks. I'm going to post this link on the Paranormal Roundtable group and on Facebook. Please join our groups. Also, Paranormal Lounge, which is Nellie's. Just trying to get her group to grow. In Humanoids with Barton Nunley. He's trying to get his group to grow. Go check out his YouTube channel. Also, please check out Paranormal Roundtable fan page and then the PRT group page, whatever. Just go check those out. The prayer group, whatever. If you need prayer or anything, whatever. So, folks, that's it. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Good night. Yeah, Green Lantern. Green Lantern's cooler than Batman anyway.
It's not the movie. Movie sucked ass.
Who cares, dude? It was just a...
I actually do like Green Lantern.
Green Lantern's way better than Batman.
I don't like the Power Ranger aspect of it. But Atrocitus, I like.
Power Ranger aspect of it?
We're still alive.
Oh my gosh. I know we're live, but I'm just trying to expose the ridiculousness of Tony and his lust for Batman. It's